My parents cut me off for 3 years, then stormed into my coffee shop. My dad demanded 20% of my business or he'd destroy me in 5 days. For 3 years, my parents didn't communicate with me because they didn't want to pay for my burial. No holidays, no calls, how are you? Just quiet, cruel, deliberate, and clean. Because I refused to comply with my father's demands at the time. Nevertheless, I constructed my existence. I converted a dilapidated little area into a coffee shop by renting a little corner apartment on Alder Street, assembling equipment one second-hand grinder at a time. People were genuinely in love. Calm music, cozy lights, familiar faces, and a chalkboard menu that I updated each morning as if it were a pledge. The bell above the glass door rang at 8:10 on a Wednesday, and the atmosphere shifted. It was the sound of my mother's laughter, not the cold outside. They entered the room as if they had been here 100 times when I looked up from the espresso machine. First was my father, with his wide shoulders, pricey coat, and the same unwavering gaze that made everyone else cringe over dinner. Beside him, my mother was grinning excessively and looking across the room as if she were counting witnesses. Behind them, my younger sister Avery was contentedly filming at chest height with her phone. At the line, they didn't hesitate. They didn't wait to be welcomed. They approached the counter directly, grinning at my patrons as if they were the proprietors paying a surprise visit. In a phony welcoming tone, my father's voice boomed. He said, "What a cute little place," loud enough for the laptop crowd to hear. "We're so proud." Proud? My hands remained steady on the milk pitcher, but my stomach nodded. He didn't get the desired flinch from me. Caleb, one of my regulars, gave me a perplexed look. He recognized my face. He was unaware of my past. Like he belonged there, my father leaned on the counter. "Isn't it charming? Our daughter is so entrepreneurial." My daughter. After 3 years of silence, my mother was publicly claiming me like a badge while grinning at a customer who was waiting for a cappuccino. I put down the milk, cleaned my hands with a towel, and quietly moved forward. I said, "Can I help you?" In an instant, my father's smile vanished. He grabbed a stapled bundle from his leather portfolio and slapped it upon my counter with such force that the pen cup rattled. "Sign this," he muttered, dropping his voice low, but keeping his posture loud. 20%. I kept my hands off of it. I glanced at the first page. My company name was neatly put in bold on the collaboration agreement. Riverside Coffee LLC, and my name appeared as though I had previously given my permission. My mom grinned. Avery's phone tilted just enough to catch my eye. With a tighter voice, my father leaned in closer. He said, "You want to keep playing independent?" I said in a flat tone, "Fine, but you're going to pay the family tax." My father's eyes remained hard as he asked, "Why would I sign over 20% of my business to you?" "I can make one call," he said. "And in 5 days, you'll be gone from this area." My face remained same, but my chest constricted. "To whom?" I inquired. He gave a cold smile. He said, "Your landlord." "Tonight, I give him a call." "You're breaking your lease," I tell him. I inform him that you are operating unsafe wiring and unapproved subletting, among other things. "Do you believe he will defend you?" "He will defend his structure." My mother grinned more broadly, as if she preferred the danger above the cash. She whispered, "You're just renting. Nothing belongs to you." I glanced at my clients instead of them. A couple had ceased communicating. At the window table, a woman was listening while feigning inattention. In any case, they adore a scene. My parents were aware of that. They didn't get one from me. Using the edge of a napkin as if it were contaminated, I slid the contract package back toward my father without touching the pages. "No," I answered plainly. My dad flexed his jaw. "Then I call him," he replied. I nodded once. "Sure," I replied coolly. My mother blinked and said, "Let's call him." For a brief while, Avery's filming hand hesitated. My father was a little hesitant, as if he didn't think I would consent. Then, as though he was enjoying it, he carefully took out his phone. "Fine," he replied. He tapped a contact and raised the phone to his ear, saying, "You're about to learn how the real world works." I leaned over the counter a little. "Put it on speaker." "Si has to be," I said in a composed tone. My father's eyes flickered with surprise, fury, and then calculation as he said, "So everyone can hear what you're about to do in my shop." However, the patrons were now observing. He would forfeit the performance edge if he declined. So he tapped speaker. In the silence, the ringtone reverberated. 2 rings, 1, then a grim, vigilant voice responded. "Yeah," replied the man, "this is Marcus." My dad grinned as if he had been anticipating this. "Marcus," he muttered softly and loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Richard Walker is this person. We must discuss your tenancy." My stomach did not move. "I haven't said anything yet." Marcus hesitated. "My renter?" he inquired. "Which one?" My dad's grin became more intense. "The coffee shop?" He uttered those words. "Coffee from Riverside. Her father is me." And I, remaining composed, gently interrupted. "Hello, Marcus, Leaning closer to the phone, I said, "It's Elena." My dad jerked his head in my direction. My mom's grin froze. Marcus's tone abruptly shifted. Recognizing, not neutral, not perplexed. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked Elena, and in that one word, "hey," I heard something my father wasn't prepared for. Something other than a landlord and disposable tenant. The smile on my father's face faded. My father's gaze darted between his phone and my face as if the gadget had deceived him. He gripped it more tightly, attempting to turn up the volume of the talk. "Marcus," he snapped, "I'm phoning on behalf of her father." Marcus interrupted him mid-sentence, saying, "I'm telling you there are issues you need to address. She's running a business in your unit that." Marcus asked in a cold voice, "Who is this?" My dad gave a single blink. Richard Walker," he said again, trying to sound courteous. "Her father." There was a pause. Then Marcus said something that abruptly reduced the size of the room. "I don't deal with fathers," he declared. My mother's grin wavered somewhat as she said, "I deal with my tenant, Elena. Are you okay?" Avery's phone dropped a little before she adjusted it once more. My voice remained steady. "I'm fine," I replied. "They came in and threatened to call you if I didn't hand away a portion of my business. I wanted you to hear it straight." Quiet. Then Marcus let out a slow, irritated breath. "All right," he replied. My father tensed up and said, "Richard, you still on speaker?" "Yes." "Good," Marcus answered. "Then you can hear me clearly. You don't get to threaten my tenant, and you don't get to call me about her lease unless you're her attorney with written authorization." My dad's jaw clenched. He made an effort to get better. "Marcus, I own multiple properties," he boasted. Marcus's voice remained composed but became more acerbic as he said, "I know how leases work. She's in violation." "You don't know how this lease works," he replied. My father's cheeks twitched as he said, "Because I wrote it." I saw him come to the realization that this wasn't just any landlord he could scare over the phone. Marcus went on. My father opened his mouth as if he wanted to refute the facts. "Elena's lease has a business writer. It's approved. The wiring was inspected. The permits were filed. I signed off on it personally." Marcus prevented him from doing so. "And Richard," he said, "I'll treat it as interference with contract and give it to my lawyer if you call my number to harass her once more." My mother's cheeks blushed slightly. "I don't play games with people who try to bully women in my buildings." My father's expression tightened when Avery's phone moved. My father tried a different strategy, soft and cunning. "Marcus, you don't understand the family situation," he responded. "Elena acts impulsively and is unstable. We're attempting to keep her safe." Marcus chuckled briefly and without humor. "Protect her," he said again, "by extorting 20% of her business in the middle of her shop." My father's mouth tightened. Marcus's tone became more icy. "You're not protecting her," he remarked. "I didn't respond when she said, 'You're trying to steal from her.'" Marcus's statement sounded more powerful coming from someone my father had anticipated to be in charge, so I let him speak it. "Elena," Marcus continued, turning back to face me, "do you want me to come down there?" "No," I said coolly. "You got it," he replied. "I want a record. I am currently texting you to let you know that your lease is secure and that I have not received any calls or claims from them. Save it." "Thank you," I replied. After a moment of silence, Marcus said, "And Elena, if they're threatening you, call the police, not me." My father lost control of the mask and yelled. He growled, "This is ridiculous," into the phone. Marcus remained motionless as he said, "You're overreacting. It's a family matter." "Family matters don't include extortion," he stated. "Goodbye." The call came to an end. The speaker stopped talking. The espresso machine's gentle hiss and the faint clink of a spoon in a cup, someone pretending nothing had occurred, were the only sounds in my shop for 30 seconds. My dad looked at his phone as if it had personally betrayed him. Then his expression changed from fury to something more repulsive as he stared up at me. "Computation. Cute," he murmured. "You think you're safe because your landlord likes you?" My mother asked with a narrower grin. "You always find a man to hide behind," she said. I didn't reply to that. I didn't stand up for myself. I didn't clarify that Marcus wasn't a man I was hiding behind. He was a business writer, a contract, a permission file, and a paper trail. Once more, my father tapped the contract packet. "Sign," he uttered more loudly. I said calmly, "Or we'll do it another way." I said, "What other way?" His eyes were full of resentment as he leaned forward. "You're running your little shop under an LLC," he replied. "I am aware that you are a registered agent, and I am aware of the documents you submitted when you established it." I felt my gut clench, but I remained motionless. "You think I can't touch you because you learned to make lattes," I answered calmly. "You haven't even been in my life for 3 years." "But," my mother looked at my sister once again and asked, "How do you know anything about my filings?" Avery's filming hand wavered a little before stabilizing. My dad's grin became more intense. "You posted your grand opening," he remarked. Then, in a brutally nonchalant tone, he said, "You tagged the business page. You're not as invisible as you think." I can file things, too. He muttered. I can make your firm look non-compliant. I can trigger an audit. I can make your merchant account freeze. I can make your suppliers scared. I looked at him calmly as he described institutional harassment in the same way that some people describe the weather. Clears throat. So, you came here to extort me and threaten fraud, I said. My father shrugged. I came to claim what's owed, he said. 20% or you lose everything. I didn't look at the contract again, instead, focusing on my customers. I didn't do it dramatically, but I picked up my phone, unlocked it, and opened my POS dashboard, the back-end admin view. They were watching, not all of them, but enough, and that meant my father was already making the mistake he always makes. He believes witnesses belong to him, but witnesses belong to whoever has proof. My father's eyebrows furrowed as I tapped the ownership and compliance tab, acting as though I was inspecting inventory. What are you doing? I kept my voice flat. I'm checking something, I said. My mother scoffed. Your little app won't help you. I didn't answer her. I walked to the end of the counter where our small office door was, opened it, and pulled a thin binder from my lockbox shelf. I went back to the kitchen, put the binder down, and opened it to a page I'd printed months ago and never thought I'd need. My father looked at it, perplexed. What is that? It's not a dramatic evidence folder, a real one, leases, permits, vendor contracts, LLC documents. It's my landlord's ownership statement, I calmly said in response to his question. My father's eyes furrowed as he said, and the property manager's authorization letter. Why would you have that? He looked down, and I saw the precise instant his confidence changed because the name on the letter wasn't just Marcus's. I slid the sheet toward him without touching his contract because I don't build anything without a paper trail. When I first negotiated this lease, I was able to identify the actual property owner's legal entity and LLC from my county record search. It wasn't Marcus's personal holding, rather, it was mine. My father blinked hard. What is this? Marcus isn't just my landlord, I answered, looking at him calmly. He's my partner on the building, he repeated, his voice softer. Avery's phone dipped, my mother's smile froze, and my father's mouth slowly opened. Partner, he repeated. I nodded once. And if you threaten to call my landlord, I added softly, you're threatening me. My father stared at the letter as if it had changed languages. Partner on the building, he repeated, too quiet to be a performance at this point. That's not how leasing works. It is when you stop leasing, I said calmly. Avery's phone hovered, looking for the angle that would make me look crazy, but she couldn't find it. I wasn't giving her one. My father tapped the counter with one finger. Prove it, he hissed. My mother's eyes narrowed. You're lying, she murmured, but her voice had lost its ease. I gave him a single nod, as if he had requested a receipt, and then I opened the binder to a tab I had labeled months earlier and slid a single page forward, revealing a recorded deed summary from the county portal with the owner entity and the legal description at the top. The names were unnegotiable, the print was clean, and the stamp was genuine. The owner line was not Marcus or Riverside Coffee, but rather the property holding LLC that Marcus and I formed after he granted me a right of first refusal, which I used when the previous owner attempted to flip the building. My name was on it, not as a tenant, but as a managing member. This caused my father's eyes to drop, and he blinked violently. So, you bought the building, my father said, his jaw tightening so much that I could feel the muscle jump. I secured the building, I amended, I secured my business. My mother's fake grin turned sharp once more. With what money? You didn't have money 3 years ago, she muttered. I calmly met her gaze and replied, I had time. And silence. Avery moved her phone in the direction of my patrons once more, attempting to recruit them as witnesses. A couple at the window table froze in the middle of a drink. Caleb gazed at my father as if he were seeing him for the first time, and my father quickly adopted a new strategy because he sensed that his first threat was fading. Fine, he yelled louder, reinflating. You believe you're untouchable because you own some bricks, your business license is still valid, taxes are still due. My gut nodded, but my tone remained the same. You still have compliance. He came in closer, speaking softly. I can make your life expensive. I inquired. I can report you, my father continued, his eyes sparkling. Health department, fire marshal, labor board. I can give your suppliers a call. I may give your payment processor a call. My mother grinned again and said, you don't know how fragile businesses are, as if she were instructing me. I can make you look risky. After giving them a long look, I repeated what I had done with the landlord call. Sure. I responded coolly, do it. My father paused, confused once more. What? His expression hardened as I responded, call whoever you want. Put it on speaker right here in front of your audience. He wanted me to appear afraid and pleading, but I was urging him to leave fingerprints. That infuriated him, so, he moved from threats to something worse. He reached into his portfolio once more and took out a second packet that was thinner, stapled, and neatly typed. He set it on the counter like a weapon, saying, this isn't a threat, this is a filing. I didn't touch it, but I read the title from where it was sitting. You can't demand ownership, I said to Riverside Coffee LLC. My mother tilted her head and said, you didn't think we forgot you, softly. We were watching, waiting. My chest tightened but my posture remained steady. I didn't argue the paper. Instead, I posed the one question it couldn't avoid. What agency did you file with? Avery's phone zoomed in on the packet as if she wanted the internet to see it and assume it indicated authority. My father's smile widened when I asked, Secretary of State. He replied, change of control. You think you're the only one who knows how to form an LLC? I reached under the counter, opened a locked drawer, and took out my own phone charging cord, but my stomach did not sink. Instead, it narrowed because if he filed anything with the state, it would leave a trail, and if he did it incorrectly, it would put his name on the error. I launched my registered agent portal app and tapped entity notifications, but there were no new filings or approvals. I asked my father, when did you file it? Not because I wanted a charge, but because the drawer also included my company compliance alerts, the one thing my father couldn't handle. I inquired. His eyes flicked away for half a second. This morning, he said, before we came. I nodded once and continued scrolling until my screen refreshed and a new alert appeared at the top with a red flag icon. Change of registered agent, control request. Urgent filing attempt detected. My father's face tightened in real time, as if he could feel the system shifting beneath him. I tapped the alert. My eyes lifted to my father, who blinked once, and then I looked at Avery, whose phone was still up and her thumb was still moving. A details page appeared with timestamps, a reference number, and one line that made my throat go cold in a controlled way. Submission source network. Riverside Coffee guest. Wi-Fi. She was no longer filming. Instead, she was using my shop's Wi-Fi to type on my counter in front of my customers. My mother's mouth tightened. Avery, she abruptly snapped, not at all performative. Avery froze. I said calmly. You are filing, I said. My father's eyes flashed. He yelled, that doesn't prove anything. And I tapped the next line. Submitted name, Richard Walker. Submitted email, Richard Walker. Two-factor verification sent to owner of record. Status pending. I didn't gloat or smile. Instead, I just turned the screen slightly so he could see his name on the attempt. You filed it under your name, I stated calmly, from my guest network. My mother's face turned pale in a tiny wave, and my father looked at my screen as if it were a dagger he hadn't anticipated. Avery's phone began to tremble a little, her recording angle was vanished, her confidence had vanished, and all she had left was panic as she growled under her breath at him. My dad made a loud effort to get better. Delete it, he growled, but I remained motionless. I can't, I said coolly. It's a registered agent alert. It is kept intact. It has timestamps and a reference number. He leaned across the counter as if he were about to take my phone. I didn't recoil, I just raised my chin a little toward the ceiling. We had them for the front door, the register, and the seating area. My father didn't think about it because people like him only think about surveillance when they're using it. Jasmine, my barista, glanced at me from the espresso station, and I nodded slightly. My mother's voice tightened. Elena, forcing sweetness back into her mouth as she reached under the counter and pressed the silent security button we installed following a break-in attempt last winter. There was no alarm, no drama, just an automatic call and a timestamp. My father straightened, sensing something shift but not knowing what. Why are you acting in this way? You walked in here to extort me, I said, looking at her calmly. Now you're committing filing fraud on my Wi-Fi. My father's face contorted. You think a little paperwork alert concerns me? I met his stare and said, you're already doing it and you're doing it on camera. He yelled, I can still ruin you. His eyes flicked upward for the first time, noticing the small black dome above the corner of the counter. Then the bell above the door rang again, and this time it wasn't a customer. A man stepped inside wearing a suit that didn't belong to this street, holding a clipboard and looking straight at my father like he already knew his name. He entered the room with a destination in mind, not hesitating at the door like a customer choosing what to order. He was in his early 50s, wearing a charcoal suit, had a clipboard tucked against his ribs, and looked at the counter, cameras, and customers before focusing on my father as though he had been given a picture. Richard Walker? He said calmly and loudly as he walked up to the cashier. My father's posture tensed as he said, Who are you? My name is Victor Hayes, he began, opening a badge-style ID card on a lanyard. Business filings compliance, he continued, responding with credentials rather than an attitude. I'm here to discuss an urgent attempt to file a change of control related to Riverside Coffee LLC. Victor glanced past my father and caught my eyes, asking, Are you Elena Walker? My mother's face stiffened. Avery's phone sank again, then raised as if she was trying to catch a clean angle. Yes, I replied, nodding once. Ma'am, we received an automated fraud trigger from your registered agent portal, he continued. A change of registered agent and executive control was attempted. The guest Wi-Fi network at this location is where the submission came from. This is private, my father angrily said, flexing his jaw. I need to confirm whether that filing was authorized by the owner of record. Victor remained motionless and remained silent. He just turned the clipboard in my direction and pointed to a reference line. Reference number, he said. Timestamp, network, source, submitted name. I leaned a little and saw the same information that had appeared on my phone, but it was printed, formal, and worse. Submission timestamp 10:07 a.m., network Riverside Coffee Guest Wi-Fi, submitted by Richard Walker. This is a misunderstanding, my mother said, we're family. Victor's eyes remained fixed. Ma'am, he said evenly, family is not a filing authority. My father attempted to reclaim the room with confidence. I'm her father, he said. Status verification pending, fraud review initiated. My father stared at the page like it was a trap he hadn't seen closing. I have a right to protect the family's interest. My father's mouth tightened. I'm not giving you anything. Victor nodded once, as if he had heard this exact line 100 times. Then you won't mind providing identification, he said. Because right now you appear as the submitting party on a suspected fraudulent filing attempt. Victor turned to face me. Ma'am, he said, if you confirm this was unauthorized, we file a formal fraud affidavit with the Secretary of State and preserve all related records, including IP logs and surveillance time windows. It was unauthorized, I said calmly, and I want everything preserved. I didn't look at my father as he yelled, don't you dare. Instead, I looked at Victor. Proceed, I replied, and he nodded once before turning to face the ceiling cameras above the counter. Your cameras cover the register area? Yes, I said in response to his question. Good, he said. We'll include a preservation request. If law enforcement requires footage, you'll have it. My mother leaned in close to me and hissed, you're going to regret humiliating us, but I didn't flinch. You humiliated yourselves, I said quietly. On my Wi-Fi, under my cameras. Victor turned back to my father as his eyes flicked upward, realizing too late that his visit had turned into an evidence timeline. Sir, he calmly stated, I need your name verified for the record. My father's eyes narrowed. You're threatening me. I'm documenting you, Victor corrected. If you refuse, I will note non-cooperation, and proceed with the fraud report under the submission data we have. My father's hand twitched toward Avery's phone, as if he wanted her to stop recording now, but Avery didn't. The front bell rang again, and this time it was 2 uniformed officers. Officer Delgado entered first, his hand resting close to his radio, while Officer Park followed with deliberate steps and scanning eyes. She continued filming because she still believed she could make this into a scene in which I appear to be the antagonist. Ma'am, Delgado continued, we received a silent alarm from this location, as she walked over to the counter and turned to face me. Are you the proprietor? Yes, I replied. Are you safe? I'm safe, I calmly replied in response to her question. They're my family. They attempted a false business file from my guest network after coming in and threatening extortion. Officer Delgado turned to face my father. Sir, she said, step back from the counter. My father raised his chin. This is a family conversation, he snapped. She's overreacting. Officer Park didn't blink. Step back, he repeated, calmer and firmer. My father paused long enough to indicate that he was considering whether the badge would still bend for him. Officer Delgado stared at Victor and said, who are you? It didn't. He took a step back. I'm here on a suspected fraudulent change of ownership submission, linked to the business, Victor stated, holding out his ID in response to her question. Officer Delgado nodded once before turning to face me. Do you want them trespassed from your property? I didn't look at my mom when she asked. Officer Park took out a little notepad and said, what was the threat? I stared at my father instead of Avery. Yes, I responded evenly. And I want it documented that he attempted to force me to sign over 20% of my business. My father said, sign over 20% or I call your landlord tonight, he said. Then he attempted to file a change of control request for my guest Wi-Fi when the landlord threat failed, I replied. You have cameras? Officer Delgado asked, his eyes narrowing. Officer Park turned to face my father. Sir, do you have identification? She questioned. Yes, I said. And the registered agent portal has the filing attempt log with timestamps. Officer Delgado spoke calmly but sharply, saying, Sir, you are being accused of attempted fraud and extortion on a business premises. My father laughed. I'm not required. Officer Park took the ID, looked at it, and then looked back up at my father. Richard Walker, he read aloud. Okay. My father's expression darkened. This is outrageous, he yelled, reaching into his coat and pulling out his wallet as if he wanted everyone to see how offended he was. Officer Delgado ignored her and turned to face me, saying, Ma'am, do you want a formal trespass warning issued? My mother's thin, poisonous smile reappeared. Now tell her to stop, she whispered to the cops. She's unstable. Yes, I replied. Officer Delgado nodded and turned to face my father. Sir, you are now officially trespassed from this business, she said. My father's eyes flashed. If you return, you will be arrested. This is my daughter, he yelled. You can't. I can, Delgado retorted. And I am. She pointed to the door. Leave. My father didn't move right away, staring at my customers as if he was trying to salvage his pride through witnesses. Then he leaned toward me, speaking in a low enough voice that it was supposed to be private, but it wasn't. This was just the beginning, he said. You think you can win with paperwork? Everything in my shop echoed. I taught you paperwork, Officer Park remarked as he moved closer. Sir, he said. Now. At last, my father turned to face the exit, followed by my mother, who had her lips clenched and her eyes flaming. Avery, who was still recording and attempting to grab the last picture, retreated last. Officer Delgado halted Avery at the doorway. Ma'am, she said, turn around. Avery blinked and said, I need your name. Why? Avery's face turned pale, and my mother said, she's a minor. Delgado calmly explained. Because the filing attempt originated from this location's Wi-Fi, and I need to document who was present and who was using devices at the counter. She's an adult, I replied bluntly, and Avery swallowed before handing over her ID with trembling hands. Officer Park accepted it, looked down, scowled a little, then looked back up at Avery, then at his radio, and finally back at Officer Delgado. Delgado, he whispered, you need to see this. What? Park tipped his notepad away from the patrons and muttered a number in response to Delgado's question. Then he turned to face me and stated, softly and cautiously, ma'am, there's an active report related to your father's name from another address. My expression remained composed, but my gut nodded. What type of report? For a moment, Officer Park's gaze lingered on mine. The same kind, he added, filing interference and attempted control. Officer Delgado led my parents and Avery outside to the sidewalk while Park followed me into the small office behind the counter. Victor Hayes also intervened, gently closing the door as if he understood chain of custody better than comfort. I didn't ask Officer Park to explain in front of my customers. Instead, I nodded once and said, we can talk in the back. Officer Park spoke first, his voice low and controlled. There's an earlier complaint tied to your father, he said. Different location, different business, similar behavior, attempted filings, coercion. The muffled sound of the cafe reappeared on the other side of the door. Espresso hiss, low conversation, someone typing. Life trying to go on while my family tried to burn mine down. I appeared worn out rather than shocked. Where? A small boutique across town, Park replied after reviewing his notes in response to my question. The owner reported pressure to sign over ownership interest. Victor's eyes tightened as an unlawful filing attempt was discovered through the state portal after she declined. Officer Park nodded. That's the same pattern, he whispered. Filing attempts using public Wi-Fi pushing for control changes. Exactly. He said. We don't always see it in real time, but your silent alarm plus the portal log created a clean timeline. I let out a slow breath. So, he's been doing this to other people, I said. Or trying, Park said. And now we have multiple incidents. Victor opened his clipboard and added a note. With today's submission reference, we can link the activity to a person, not just a network, he said, especially with CCTV and the physical presence at the counter. Officer Delgado knocked once before cracking open the office door. They're outside, she said. They're arguing on the sidewalk. I nodded. Let them, I said coolly. Because arguing isn't power in my world. Paper is. I said as I emerged from behind the bar and turned to face the room once more. My patrons had fallen silent, the way people do when they know they've just seen something they'll discuss later. Sorry about that, I remarked to the room in a steady voice, without making a speech. Drinks are on track. My barista, Jasmine, met my gaze and nodded. She didn't appear afraid, but rather proud, having seen enough of my father's kind to comprehend what I had just done. Then I went outside. Jasmine will take care of you. Officer Delgado held her notebook and spoke to my father in a tone that did not encourage compromise. You've been trespassed, she said. Leave the area. Avery was crying quietly, clutching her phone as if it were her lifeline, while my father paced close to the curb as if he wanted to continue performing even in the absence of an audience. This is insane, my father yelled, his eyes burning. She stole from us. We are owed by her. We gave her everything. You gave me 3 years of silence, I remarked coolly, and he turned to face me. And we gave you your start, he growled. We paid for your initial equipment. I didn't dispute the lies. Officer Delgado, I continued, I'd like to file a report for attempted extortion and attempted fraudulent business filing. I took out a single, thin, unremarkable folder from my coat and held it up. The officer's body cam should be saved too. The filing attempt moment and the counter area are captured by the cameras inside, Delgado agreed. We'll document, she continued, causing my father's jaw to clench. You're really doing this, he snarled. Yes, I responded. He moved closer, speaking softly in an attempt to intimidate me one last time. You think you can ruin me with paperwork? He said, "I can ruin you with one call." Officer Park instinctively moved between us and said, "Back up," saying, "I know people. You're going to regret this," my mother said in a cold, biting voice. "You'll be alone again," she continued. My father's eyes flicked to Park's badge, and his posture slightly altered because bullies usually recalibrate when the room stops being theirs. I stared at her. "Nobody will want you." I said, "I'd rather be alone than owned." Officer Delgado completed the trespass paperwork and gave my father the warning. "Sign," she said. My father initially refused, but after realizing that refusal wouldn't make it go away, he swiped his name angrily. Avery whispered, "Dad, stop." But he didn't hear her, he just heard pride. Victor Hayes emerged next to the officers as they began to leave. "Sir," he shouted to my father in a cool, collected manner. "One more thing." My father turned, annoyed. "What?" "Your filing attempt reference number is now flagged," Victor stated, holding up his clipboard. "It will be cross-linked with the earlier complaint. Any further attempt to change control of an entity you do not own will trigger an automatic fraud review and law enforcement notification." My father's face tightened. "You're threatening me." "No," Victor answered. "I'm informing you." My father appeared to be about to blow up, but there were cameras, uniforms, and customers observing from inside. So he did the only thing left. He left. 3 days later, my registered agent forwarded me the official incident packet, the attempted change of control submission, the network source information, the reference number, and the fraud flag status that prevented the filing from ever being accepted. My attorney sent a formal preservation letter to the Secretary of State's office and to the Filings Compliance Unit, ensuring the submission logs and authentication attempts were retained. Because of the prior boutique complaint, the police report from my shop was not handled as a family drama. Instead, they opened a case for repeated attempted fraud after observing the pattern, the same coercive language, the same sign over a percentage, and the same attempted filing from public Wi-Fi rather than a single emotional outburst. It was a strategy. 10 days later, my father received a restraining order prohibiting him from entering my building, my business, and my home. The order contained a specific clause about interfering with business operations and attempting administrative control, which he detested more than the distance because it identified him. After the existence of the body cam, the filings record, and the fact that my customers had witnessed them enter my counters grinning as if they owned them, my mother tried the old-fashioned approach of calling relatives, telling stories, and sending messages about forgiveness and family unity, but it didn't work out the way it used to. The same night the officers took her statement, Avery deleted her video attempts, but it didn't matter because the building cameras and the portal logs were already preserved. She wasn't charged, but she was documented, and that was enough to prevent her from playing content creator with my life once more. Once she realized she couldn't alter reality, she stopped visiting the shop. When my attorney added the email that appeared to be from a business consultant offering me a strategic partnership to the case file, the investigating officer called my father directly, and that's when he finally realized what was going on. Customers who saw the situation returned, some left extra tips, and one woman handed me a note that read, "Thank you for staying calm." Every step he took now created another timestamp. The coffee shop didn't suffer, instead, it grew stronger. That's what true power looks like. I kept it in the same drawer as my permits, lease, and file alerts without framing it. Evidence that my life is no longer based on acceptance. And when my parents realized they couldn't force their way into ownership, they did what they usually do when they lose. They vanished once more. However, this time, the stillness felt different because it was mine. This concludes the narrative. Hello everyone, I sincerely hope you enjoyed it. If you had been cut off from your family for years and they suddenly showed up at your business demanding a percentage, would you give in just to keep the peace? Or would you stand your ground and let the truth speak for itself? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. I'd really like to know what you would do. Please remember to like and subscribe if this tale struck a chord with you in any way. It greatly benefits the channel, and I thank each and every one of you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. They mocked me for arriving late and dirty to dinner until the old veteran from Route 17 entered and exposed the truth. Everyone in the room stood up simultaneously. They had just laughed at me. I was standing at the doorway of the Bennett family dining room, my boots dirty, my Marine Corps jacket covered with oil, and my hair pulled back in an untidy knot that had long ago broken apart. Victoria Bennett had just murmured something to one of the attendees, making a few of them laugh. I recall feeling the heat flood into my face. The sound of an ancient pickup truck engine gradually rolled up the gravel driveway outside. A moment later, the front door opened, and then everyone at the dinner table stood up, including Charles Bennett, the same man who had spent the previous 18 minutes emphatically stating that I did not belong anywhere near his family. I had no idea what was going on yet, but I did know one thing. Something had just changed, and it all began earlier that afternoon, some 28 miles along Route 17. I'm Rachel Hayes, a staff sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. I had recently returned from an 8-month assignment overseas when this story took place. I was stationed at Marine Corps Base Quantico in Virginia, so I had become used to the calm pace of Northern Virginia life again. Tree-lined streets, modest diners, historic farms, and communities where people still wave as you go by. Coming home from deployment always feels awkward. You spend months living in a world where every minute is structured and purposeful. Then you're back in normal life, when folks are concerned about traffic, grocery stores, and lawn maintenance. But that week, I was thinking about something far bigger. I was finally about to meet Lucas Bennett's parents. Lucas and I had been together for over 3 years. A mutual acquaintance introduced us at a Memorial Day BBQ in Fredericksburg. He was a civil engineer with a construction firm, tall, smart, and one of the most patient men I'd ever met. But his family, that was another matter. The Bennetts were the type of family that everyone in town spoke about. Old Virginia money, a magnificent colonial mansion near Warrington, horse property, charity boards, and golf club memberships. Lucas had always been open with me about them. They are customary, he informed me once. That was the polite way of saying they didn't exactly approve of a Marine dating their son. His mother once asked him, half jokingly, "Don't you think you'd be happier with someone a little more refined?" His father was even more frank. Charles Bennett, a woman in the Marine Corps, once stated to Lucas on the phone, "Son, that's not exactly the life I pictured for my future daughter-in-law." Lucas always stood up for me, but I could tell the situation was weighing on him. So when he called me one evening, 9 days after I returned from deployment, I knew something major was about to happen. He said to Rachel, "My parents are hosting a dinner this Saturday." I lay back on the couch in my modest Quantico apartment. "That sounds formal." "It is," he acknowledged. "But they want to meet you." I stopped. "Or do they want to inspect me?" Lucas chuckled quietly. "Maybe a little of both." His tone became more serious. "I know they've said some things that weren't fair, but if they actually meet you, Rachel, they'll see what I see." That remark stuck with me. They will see what I see. I wanted it to be true. On Saturday afternoon, I left base early. I exchanged my camouflage suit for a modest navy dress and low heels, packed a little overnight bag just in case, and began driving toward Warrington. The October weather was ideal. Virginia autumn, chilly air, golden leaves drifting across the road, and broad swaths of farmland shimmering in the late afternoon sun. I recall thinking it was a nice day for fresh starts. The Bennett house was around 55 minutes distant. Plenty of time, or so I thought. About halfway there, just outside a small rural crossroads, I observed an old pickup truck stopped on the side of the road. The hood was up. An elderly man stood beside it, leaning into the engine bay with a firm purpose. Most automobiles drove right by him. For a brief moment, I did as well. Then my Marine instinct kicked in. You don't leave someone stranded if you can help it. I slowed down, grabbed the shoulder, and stepped outside. The man looked up in amazement. "Afternoon, ma'am?" he asked, cleaning his hands with a rag. "You're having trouble?" I inquired. He offered a slight apologetic smile. "Truck overheated, thought I could get her going again, but," he said. The pickup truck appeared to be quite old. Possibly an early 1980s model. Solid vehicle, although clearly heavily used. I glanced at the dashboard thermometer. The engine block was still hot. "Mind if I take a look?" I inquired. He looked at me for a second, seeing my Marine Corps jacket. Then he nodded. "Well, now I won't turn down help from a Marine." That's how it all began. If I had simply kept driving that afternoon, none of the above would have occurred. What I didn't realize was that aiding that man would make me very late. I arrived at the Bennett dinner late, looking like I had crawled out from beneath a truck. It was late enough for them to laugh at me. And late enough for something altogether different to happen. Something neither of us could have expected. The old pickup truck appeared to have been on Virginia roads longer than I had been alive. It was a faded forest green Ford, the type of truck you rarely see nowadays, except on ancient farms or in tiny towns where people keep things going long after most people would have traded them in. The paint had chipped in spots, the chrome bumper had a dent on one side, and the hood trembled slightly when heat escaped from the engine compartment. The elderly man walked back, wiping his hands with the same rag. "My name is Walter," he said. "Rachel," I responded. He nodded towards my jacket. "Marine Corps?" "Yes, sir." He smiled quietly, approvingly. "Well, I'll be damned. Haven't seen that eagle, globe, and anchor up close in a while." Something about his tone made me pause. "You serve?" I inquired. He chuckled gently. "Long time ago. Vietnam." That explains the expression in his eyes. I'd seen it previously with older veterans at the VFW hall near Quantico. People who have been through combat tend to bear a particular calm weight. I moved closer to the engine and leaned over. The problem was quickly identified. The radiator hose had loosened enough to leak coolant, causing the engine to overheat while he was driving. "You were close to cooking this engine, I told you." Walter sighed. "Yeah, she's been threatening to give up on me for years. Let's see if we can buy her a few more." I strolled back to my car and got the tiny tool pouch I had in the trunk. Marines learn to repair anything in the field, whether it's equipment, generators, or whatever breaks when you're far from help. Walter saw me tighten the hose clamp and refill the coolant that was left. "You've ever worked on engines?" he inquired. "Enough to get myself out of trouble." He laughed. "Well, I'm glad someone knows what they're doing." As the engine cooled, we sat against the vehicle and talked. Walter informed me that he lived approximately 12 miles down the road in a little farmhouse that had been in his family since the early 1960s. "Just me now," he stated. "My wife passed away 7 years ago." I nodded gently. "I'm sorry to hear that." He gazed down at the gravel road for a bit, then smiled slightly. "Good woman. School teacher. Kept me in line for 39 years. This made me happy." "What about you?" he inquired. "Got family around here?" "Not really," I replied. "I am stationed at Quantico." "And what takes you out onto these country roads today?" I paused. "Actually, I am on my way to meet my boyfriend's parents." Walter lifted his eyebrow. "Now it sounds serious." I made a nervous laugh. "It is. First meeting." "Yes, sir." "Let me guess," he responded, folding his arms. "You're more scared about that dinner than anything you've encountered abroad." I chuckled again because he was not mistaken. "Something like that." He looked at me carefully. "They do not approve. They have doubts." Walter nodded slowly. "I've encountered people like that before." I didn't say anything, but he seemed to understand nonetheless. "People sometimes forget what a true character looks like," he explained. After a few minutes, the engine was cool enough to test. I started the truck while Walter monitored the hose connection. "There's no leak." The engine steadied into a consistent growl. Walter exhaled a long breath of relief. "Well, I will be." I closed the hood and stepped back. "That should bring you home," I explained. Walter held out his hand. I shook it. His grip was solid, despite his age. He told Rachel, "I appreciate you stopping. Anyone could have done the same." He shakes his head. "Not these days." I looked at my watch, and my stomach fell. I was already 22 minutes late. "Shoot," I mumbled. Walter noticed. "Dinner will probably be without you." He offered me a compassionate glance. "So, we best not keep them waiting." I smiled as I grabbed my tool pouch. Walter peeked through the window as I climbed back into my car. "Rachel?" "Yes, sir." He pointed down the street. "Who are the folks you'll be meeting?" "They are about to see what kind of woman their son chose." I smiled sweetly. "I hope so." Then I started the engine and got back on the road. The sun was now lower, sending long orange shadows across the fields. I drove faster than I probably should have, checking the clock every few minutes. 32 minutes late, then 37. By the time I turned down the long gravel drive leading to the Bennett estate, I knew I'd made a bad first impression. The house appeared just as Lucas had described. White columns, a large front porch, pleasant lights blazing through the towering windows, and several fine cars already parked in the circular driveway. It appeared more like a formal gathering than a family supper. I got out of the car and realized something. My hands. They were still grease-stained, and the front of my Marine Corps jacket was not much better. I tried wiping them with a napkin from the glove compartment, but it didn't really help. Too late now. I drew a breath and proceeded to the front door. I could hear talking in the dining room from the time I walked in. Laughter, silverware clinking, and the talk is already well underway. Lucas emerged from the hallway as soon as he noticed me. His eyes expanded. "Rachel," I was getting anxious. He then noticed the grease. "What happened?" I gave a slight shrug. "Long story." He grinned faintly. "Honestly, I'm simply thrilled you're here." Before I could say anything else, another voice came from the dining room. "Lucas," a woman said, "is that your guest?" Lucas clasped my hand. "Ready?" I asked, nodding. When we walked into the dining room together, all of the conversations at the table came to an end. 11 pairs of eyes focused on me. I observed Victoria Bennett notice the grease on my jacket. Her lips twisted into a tiny smile, and then the laughter began. Initially, the laughter was quiet. It began with a few low giggles from the far end of the table. Kind individuals try to hide behind a napkin or a glass of wine. However, in a quiet dining room, even little laughter carry. I felt them like small taps on my pride. Lucas squeezed my hand again, as if to support me. "Everyone," he continued gently, "this is Rachel." I stood at the Bennett dining room doorway, uncomfortably conscious of every detail about myself. My boots still had some dust from the road. My Marine Corps jacket had grease smudges on one sleeve. My hands were cleaner than they had been previously, but the stains had not totally faded, and the room around me resembled something out of a magazine. A long, polished wooden table stretched along the center, adorned with crystal glasses and crisply folded linen napkins. The lighting was warm and lovely, reflected in the framed paintings on the walls. A roasted chicken sat on a silver serving tray in the center of the table. Everyone else looked flawless. Pressed shirts, gorgeous gowns, and neatly done hair. And then there's me. Victoria Bennett, together with her husband, stood at the head of the table. She was a tall woman with silver hair nicely arranged at the back of her head. Her gaze moved slowly from my boots to my face. She tilted her head. "Well," she said gently, "you certainly made an entrance." A few folks laughed again. Lucas cleared his throat. "Rachel got into a little trouble on her way here." Victoria lifted her eyebrow. "Oh." I walked forward, attempting to keep my voice calm. I mentioned that there was a man broken down on Route 17, his truck had overheated. I stopped to assist. For a moment, the room was silent. Then someone down the table muttered quietly, "How noble." It did not sound like a compliment. Victoria folded her hands politely. Rachel remarked, "That's very kind of you, but I believe most people would have phoned roadside help." I did not respond. Lucas took out a chair next to him. "Why don't you sit down?" he asked kindly. I sat. As I did, Charles Bennett finally spoke. He had a voice that could fill a room without the need for amplification. So he continued, looking at me, "You're the Marine." "Yes, sir." He sat back in his chair. I'll admit Lucas's choice surprised us. Lucas shifted alongside me. "Dad." But Charles raised his hand slightly. "I'm merely being honest," he explained. He stared at me again. "And honesty is something that Marines cherish, right?" "Yes, sir," I said. "So," he continued gently, "I think we may begin with the obvious question." The table had fallen utterly silent again. "What do you intend to do after your military career is completed?" I blinked. "Sir." He made a vague gesture toward my outfit. "This type of living does not last forever. Eventually, people settle down and start families," Victoria remarked gently. "We've always believed that stability is key." One of the women across the table nodded, particularly for young couples. Lucas sighed quietly. But I responded honestly. "I've built my career in the Marine Corps," I explained. "I intend to continue serving for as long as I can." Charles looked at me as if he were reviewing a business proposition. "Interesting." He raised his wine glass. "I think Lucas finds that exciting." Another faint ripple of laughter spread over the table. Lucas's jaw stiffened. "That's not fair," he said. Victoria offered him a serene expression. "We're merely attempting to figure out her background." She turned back to face me. "Tell me, Rachel, where you grew up." "Ohio," I said. "A little town." "Yes, ma'am." "What did your parents do?" "My father worked at a manufacturing. My mom was a nurse." Victoria smiled nicely, but I could sense judgment behind it. So she said, "Hard-working people." Charles took a bite of chicken before speaking again. "You must admit Lucas comes from a rather different environment." Lucas leaned forward. "Dad." But Charles persisted. We raised him with certain expectations. His gaze returned to my grease-stained sleeve. "I think dinner parties like this are uncommon in the Marine Corps." "The side aside or what?" Someone at the end of the table burst out laughing that time. Lucas's hand tensed alongside mine, but I kept my voice level. "No sir," I replied. "They're not." Victoria exhaled lightly, as if trying to calm the situation. "Well, let's not dwell on awkward beginnings." She pointed to the meal. "Please, everyone, let's eat." Plates started moving again. Conversations gradually resumed, but I could still sense occasional glances directed at my jacket, my hands, and my presence at the table. Victoria leaned forward the woman seated next to her and murmured something. The woman covered her mouth while laughing. I focused on my plate. Lucas, across from me, appeared to apologize. "I'm really sorry," he said quietly. "It's okay," I said quietly. But, truthfully, I felt smaller in that room than I had in a long time. Not because of their money or their mansion, but because they already knew who I was before I came through the door. Nothing I said seemed to sway their thoughts. Dinner continued like this for another 18 minutes. Polite chat, delicate comments, a few jokes that weren't actually jokes, and then the sound of tires crunching on gravel came through the open dining room window. No one paid attention at first, but the engine noise became increasingly loud. Someone outside closed a car door, and the house's front door opened moments after. Footsteps sounded down the hallway. I heard an older voice say, "Hello, anyone home?" Lucas frowned slightly. Victoria looked perplexed, and Charles Bennett gently turned his gaze to the doorway. A second later, the elderly man I had helped on the side of the road entered the dining room. For a moment, no one spoke. The elderly man stood in the doorway, holding his cap with one hand. The dining room lights highlighted the deep lines on his face and the worn denim jacket he wore over a faded plaid shirt. It took me a half-second to recognize him. Walter was the same man whose truck I had repaired less than an hour before. My initial thought was simple confusion. What was he doing here? Walter looked around the room with mild curiosity, as if he had walked into an unexpected gathering. "Well, now," he replied, his voice warm and steady. "Looks like supper time." His gaze then fell on me. A smile appeared on his face. "Well, I'll be," he said. "Rachel." Everyone in the room turned to face me again. I felt Lucas shift beside me, whispering, "You know him?" Before I could answer, Walter continued walking into the room. And that's when things changed. Charles Bennett pushed his chair back so quickly that it scraped loudly across the hardwood flooring. He then stood up, not slowly or casually. He stood up the way soldiers do when someone important enters the room. The remainder of the table followed almost immediately. One by one, the chairs moved. People stood. Victoria Bennett rose as well, but her expression had changed from confident amusement to something far more uncertain. Lucas appeared to be in the same state of confusion as me. "Mr. Hayes," Charles stated. His voice was completely different now. Respectful. Walter gave him a friendly nod. "Evening, Charles," he said Charles' name casually, which surprised everyone at the table. Charles moved forward quickly. "I didn't realize you were coming by tonight." Walter shrugged. "Wasn't planning to." He returned my gaze. "But I had a reason." Victoria shifted her gaze from Walter to me and back again. "You two know each other?" she inquired. Walter chuckled. "Met about 45 minutes ago." The confusion around the table was complete. Charles frowned slightly. "On the road?" Walter asked, nodding. "Truck overheated on Route 17. He pointed at me. "This Marine right here pulled over and fixed it." Every eye in the room focused on me. The silence felt different, heavier. Walter moved further into the room. "You've got a good one here, Charles," he stated calmly. Charles blinked. "I'm sorry?" Walter rested his cap on the back of an empty chair. "This young woman," he continued, "stopped on a rural road when half a dozen other cars drove past." He looked around the table. "She didn't ask who I was. Didn't care what I drove. Didn't care how old my truck was. She just helped." No one spoke. Walter nodded toward my grease-stained sleeve. "That's why she looks like she crawled out from under an engine." Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Walter's tone wasn't angry, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that comes from someone who has spent a lifetime being listened to. Charles cleared his throat. "That was very kind of her." Walter made a slow turn toward him. "You remember what we used to say in the Corps?" Charles froze. Walter continued. "Character shows up when nobody's watching." Now I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The way Charles Bennett stood in front of Walter. Straight, almost rigid, like an old habit had come back without him thinking about it. Lucas leaned toward me. "Wait," he whispered. "Do you know who that is?" I shook my head slightly. Walter pulled out a chair and sat down casually. Victoria still looked lost. "Walter," she said carefully, "would you like to join us for dinner?" Walter smiled. "Well, I wasn't planning to interrupt anything." He glanced around the table, though it looked like things were getting interesting. A few people avoided his eyes. Charles slowly sat again. "Yes, well," Walter folded his hands calmly on the table. "Rachel here told me she was on her way to meet her boyfriend's parents." His eyes moved around the room. "Funny thing is, she never mentioned they were you folks." Victoria blinked. Lucas finally spoke. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Lucas." Walter smiled warmly. "Good to meet you, son." Then he leaned back slightly in his chair. "You picked a strong partner." Lucas nodded slowly. "I believe I did." Walter looked back at Charles again. "Charles," he said quietly. "Yes, sir." Charles replied automatically. A few guests exchanged surprised looks. Walter tilted his head slightly. "You remember a night in Quang Tri Province in 1969? The room went completely still. Charles's face changed. I saw recognition hit him like a memory he hadn't visited in years. "Yes," he said softly. Walter nodded. "That was the night your patrol got pinned down." Charles didn't speak. Walter continued calmly. "You were 23 years old, a young lieutenant trying to get your men home alive." He paused. "And the Marine who pulled you out of that ditch?" Walter tapped the table lightly. "That was me." No one in the room moved. Walter looked around the table slowly. "So when I say this young Marine has character," he gestured toward me again. "I know exactly what I'm talking about." Charles Bennett lowered his eyes, and for the first time that evening, the man who had been laughing at me looked ashamed. The room stayed silent for a long moment after Walter finished speaking. Not the polite silence from earlier in the evening. This one felt different. Heavy, reflective, the kind of silence that settles over a room when people suddenly realize they might have been wrong. I sat there unsure what to do with my hands. 18 minutes earlier, those same people had been laughing at the grease on my jacket. Now, no one seemed able to look at it. Walter leaned back slightly in his chair, completely at ease, like a man who had walked into a familiar place rather than a room full of stunned dinner guests. Victoria Bennett cleared her throat. "Well, Walter," she said carefully, "we didn't realize Rachel had helped you." Walter gave a small shrug. "She didn't know who I was." He looked around the table again. "That's what made it matter." Lucas's hand slipped quietly over mine under the table. I could feel the pride in the way he squeezed my fingers. Across the table, Charles Bennett still hadn't fully recovered from the story Walter had just told. He stared down at his plate for a moment before slowly lifting his head again. "Walter," he said quietly, "I didn't expect to see you tonight." Walter smiled faintly. "Life has a funny way of arranging meetings." He gestured toward me again. "If she hadn't stopped on that road, I'd still be sitting beside that old truck waiting for a tow truck. Victoria's posture softened slightly. Well, she said, we're certainly grateful she helped you. Walter tilted his head toward her. You should be. There was no accusation in his voice, but the meaning was clear enough. The guests around the table shifted in their chairs. The earlier laughter had disappeared completely. One of the older men sitting near the end of the table leaned forward. Walter Hayes, he said slowly. You're the Walter Hayes, aren't you? Walter gave him a puzzled look. I suppose that depends on which one you mean. The Veterans Foundation, the man said. The one that built the rehabilitation center in town. Walter nodded casually. That was a group effort. The man looked impressed. I've read about you in the paper. Victoria turned slightly toward Charles. You never mentioned, Walter was involved with the foundation. Charles gave a quiet sigh. He's involved in a lot of things. Walter waved the comment away. I stay busy. Then he glanced back toward me again. Mostly because people like Rachel here remind me why it matters. That sentence landed differently than the others. Walter wasn't just praising me anymore. He was teaching the room something. Lucas leaned forward slightly. Mr. Hayes, he said Rachel told you she was coming here tonight. Walter nodded. She mentioned meeting her boyfriend's family. Lucas gave a small smile. Well, I'm the boyfriend. Walter chuckled. Then you've made a good choice, son. Lucas looked genuinely proud. I know. Victoria reached for her wine glass, but I noticed her hand had lost the confident steadiness it had earlier in the evening. Rachel, she said gently, we had no idea you'd stop to help someone. I answered honestly. It didn't seem like something worth mentioning. Walter looked at me and nodded. That right there, he said softly, is exactly why it matters. Charles rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Then he looked across the table at me. I owe you an apology. The word seemed difficult for him. Earlier that evening, he had been completely certain of himself. Now he looked like a man reconsidering everything he had assumed. I judged you too quickly, he continued. You walked in late, and I drew conclusions. I held his gaze. That happens sometimes. Charles nodded slowly. Walter leaned forward slightly. You know, Charles, he said, I remember another young Marine people underestimated once. Charles raised an eyebrow. Oh. Walter pointed directly at him. You. A few guests smiled faintly. Walter continued, when I first met you in Vietnam, you were barely old enough to shave. Charles chuckled quietly. That's not entirely inaccurate. Walter nodded. Some of the older officers didn't think you'd last a month. Charles looked surprised. I didn't know that. Walter smiled. Most leaders never hear what people say before they prove themselves. He gestured toward me again. Rachel's already proven something important. Victoria looked curious. What's that? Walter answered calmly. That she'll do the right thing even when nobody's watching. The table stayed quiet again, then Lucas spoke. That's exactly who she is. His voice carried quiet pride. Victoria looked at her son, then back at me. I could see the shift happening in her mind. Not dramatic, not sudden, but real. Well, she said slowly, it seems tonight we may have misjudged our guest. Walter gave a small smile. Seems that way. Charles finally picked up his fork again. Then he looked at me across the table. Rachel, he said, I'd like to start this evening over. He gestured toward the empty chair beside Lucas. If you're willing. I nodded. I am. And for the first time since I had walked into that house, the tension in the room began to ease. But the biggest change wasn't in the room, it was in the way Charles Bennett looked at me. Earlier that night, he had seen a Marine who didn't belong. Now he was seeing something else entirely, something he recognized. Character. Dinner resumed slowly after that. Not in the stiff, uncomfortable way it had earlier in the evening, but with the careful pace of people who were reconsidering their earlier judgments. Victoria asked the housekeeper to bring another place setting, and Walter settled comfortably into a chair near the center of the table. The roasted chicken was passed again, along with bowls of mashed potatoes and green beans, and the quiet clinking of silverware returned to the room. But the tone had changed. Earlier, the conversations had felt like an evaluation. Now they felt like a conversation. Walter seemed perfectly comfortable sitting among the Bennetts and their guests. He ate slowly, occasionally sharing small stories about the town, the veteran center, or the farm where he still lived. More than once, someone at the table asked him questions, but every so often he would bring the conversation back around to me. So Rachel, he said at one point, how long you been in the Corps? Almost 8 years, I replied. Staff sergeant already, he said with a nod. That's no small thing. Charles looked at me with new interest. 8 years, he repeated. That means you enlisted young. I was 19, I said. What made you choose the Marines? It was a fair question, and one I'd answered many times over the years. My father served in the Army, I explained. When I was younger, I watched how much pride he had in that time. When I graduated high school, I wanted to challenge myself. Walter chuckled. You picked the toughest branch to do that. I did. Victoria leaned forward slightly. And you've been deployed? Yes, ma'am. To where? Mostly the Middle East. Victoria nodded slowly. I can't imagine that life. I shrugged gently. It's not easy sometimes, but it's meaningful. Walter lifted his glass. That it is. The guests at the table listened with growing attention. Earlier, they had seemed amused by my presence. Now they were curious. Respectful. One of the men across the table asked about life on base. Another asked about leadership in the military. Someone else asked what it was like training young Marines. I answered each question calmly. But the conversation shifted again when Charles spoke. Walter, he said you said earlier that Rachel reminded you of something. Walter nodded. I did. Charles rested his hands on the table. What exactly did you mean? Walter wiped his hands with his napkin and leaned back slightly. When people get older, he said they start judging things by appearances. He looked around the table. Nice house, good clothes, right schools, the kind of signals society teaches us to look for. Victoria looked slightly uncomfortable. Walter continued calmly. But the older I get, the more I realize those things don't tell you much about a person. He nodded toward me. I saw something today that matters a lot more. The table was quiet again. Walter spoke slowly, carefully, choosing his words. Rachel didn't know who I was when she stopped that car. She didn't know my background, didn't know my connections. Didn't know that helping me might lead to a room like this. He paused. She helped because someone needed help. Lucas nodded quietly. Walter continued. That kind of character doesn't come from money. It doesn't come from reputation. It comes from values. Charles listened carefully. Walter turned slightly toward him. And you know something about those values? Charles nodded slowly. Yes, I do. Walter smiled faintly. I remember that night in Vietnam very clearly. The guests leaned in slightly. You were a young lieutenant trying to get your men through a bad situation. Charles gave a quiet laugh. I was scared out of my mind. Walter pointed a finger at him. But you stayed. You made sure every man under your command got out. He looked around the table again. That's what leadership looks like. Charles sat quietly for a moment. Then he looked back at me. Rachel, he said, I owe you more than just an apology. You walked into my home tonight after doing something honorable. And instead of welcoming you, we judged you. Victoria lowered her eyes slightly. That was wrong. I shook my head gently. It's understandable. Charles raised an eyebrow. Why do you say that? Because people often assume the worst when they don't understand something. Walter nodded approvingly. That's wisdom. Lucas squeezed my hand again. Charles leaned back and studied me thoughtfully. You know, he said, when Lucas first told us about you, I pictured someone very different. I smiled slightly. I imagine you did. He chuckled gently. Yes, I suppose I did. Then he looked around the table. Well, he said, lifting his glass slightly, I think we've all learned something tonight. Walter smiled. That's the good part about getting older. You're still allowed to learn. Victoria lifted her glass as well. To learning, she said softly. The rest of the table followed. Glasses rose. For the first time that evening, I felt completely at ease sitting there. Not because anyone had suddenly decided to approve of me, but because something more important had happened. They had seen me. Not the grease on my jacket, not the Marine uniform, not the background they had judged earlier. They had seen the person underneath, and sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. By the time dessert was served, the evening felt completely different from the one I had walked into. Victoria brought out a homemade apple pie, still warm, with vanilla ice cream melting slowly over each slice. The tension that had filled the dining room earlier had softened into something quieter and more genuine. People were talking again, but now the conversation sounded relaxed instead of careful. Walter was telling a story about a fishing trip he'd taken years ago with some Marines from the Veterans Center. A few of the guests laughed as he described one of them falling into the lake after insisting he knew exactly how to steer a small boat. Lucas sat beside me with his arm resting lightly on the back of my chair. Every once in a while, sheets out, he would glance at me and smile like he still couldn't quite believe how the evening had turned around. Across the table, Charles Bennett watched Walter finish his story. Then he cleared his throat. Walter, he said quietly. I never properly thanked you. Walter looked up. For what? For that night in Vietnam. The room grew still again. Walter waved a hand casually. That was a long time ago. Charles shook his head. Not to me. He paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. You saved my life. Walter studied him quietly. Then he gave a small nod. Well, that's what Marines do. Charles smiled faintly. And apparently, he added, glancing toward me, it's still what they do. Victoria turned toward me with a gentler expression than the one she had worn earlier that evening. Rachel, she said, I want to apologize again. Her voice was sincere. When you walked through that door tonight, I saw someone who didn't fit the picture I had in my mind. She folded her hands together on the table, and instead of asking questions, I made assumptions. I nodded slightly. It happens. She gave a small regretful smile. Yes, but it shouldn't. Lucas leaned forward. Mom, Rachel is pretty used to people underestimating her. Walter chuckled. Most good Marines are. Victoria looked at me again. Well, I'm very glad you stopped to help Walter today. She paused. And I'm very glad you came to dinner. Charles nodded in agreement. I'd like to say the same. He leaned back in his chair and studied me thoughtfully. You know, he said, when Lucas first told us about you, I worried. I raised an eyebrow. About what? He smiled slightly. That you might not fit into our world. Walter gave a soft laugh. Charles glanced toward him, but tonight reminded me of something important. He tapped the table lightly. The world doesn't need more people who fit into the same mold. Walter lifted his fork. It needs people with character. Charles nodded. Exactly. He turned back to me. And I can see now why my son cares about you. Lucas looked both relieved and amused. Well, that's good to hear. Victoria smiled warmly. Yes, it is. Walter finished the last bite of pie and wiped his hands with his napkin. You know, he said thoughtfully, nights like this remind me of something my father used to say. Everyone looked toward him. He used to say that a person's true character shows up in the quiet moments. He pointed toward the window where the gravel driveway stretched into the darkness, like stopping on a country road to help a stranger. He looked at me. That's the kind of thing people remember. I felt a quiet warmth in my chest hearing that. Not pride exactly, just the feeling that maybe I had done something small that mattered. Lucas squeezed my hand again. I already knew that about her, he said. Charles smiled. Well, I'm glad we know it now, too. The evening slowly began to wind down after that. Coats were gathered. Guests thanked Victoria for dinner. Cars pulled away from the long gravel driveway one by one. Walter stood near the front door as he prepared to leave. Before stepping outside, he turned toward me. Rachel, he said. Yes, sir. You ever get out toward the Veterans Center in Warrington? Not often. You should. He nodded toward Charles. This old lieutenant here helps run a few programs for younger veterans. Charles chuckled, trying to give back a little. Walter smiled. People like Rachel are exactly the kind of leaders those programs need. Charles looked thoughtful. Well, he said, I'd be honored if you ever wanted to stop by. I'd like that, I replied. Walter tipped his cap slightly. Good. Then he stepped outside into the cool Virginia night. Lucas and I stood on the porch watching his old truck rumble down the gravel driveway. For a moment, we just listened to the quiet countryside. Then Lucas looked at me. You know, he said, that might be the most dramatic dinner my family has ever had. I laughed softly. I'm glad it ended the way it did. He nodded. Me, too. As we walked back inside, I thought about how the whole evening had unfolded. It would have been easy to hold on to resentment, easy to be angry about the laughter or the assumptions, but life has a funny way of teaching people lessons when they least expect it. Sometimes the best kind of revenge isn't about proving someone wrong with anger. Sometimes it's simply about showing them who you truly are and letting your actions speak louder than their expectations ever could. If this story reminded you of someone who showed kindness when it mattered most, I hope you'll share it with them. And if you believe that character still matters in this world, I'd be honored if you followed along for more stories like this one. Because sometimes the smallest moments, like stopping on a quiet country road, can change everything. Am I the asshole for refusing to move in with my boyfriend to care for my 16-year-old cat in his final months? Throwaway, and I'm on mobile, sorry for the format. I've been dating my 24F boyfriend, 26M, for a bit over a year now, and he really wants me to move in with him. The problem? My cat. My cat is 16, and dying. The vet says it would be unwise to hope for anything past 6 months. I've had this cat since I was a child, he was there for me through everything. There are a few reasons I don't want to move. 1. Moving is really stressful for cats, and I don't want to cause any unneeded stress for my old boy. 2. My boyfriend has a fairly energetic Rottweiler. My cat has never been good with dogs, almost killed when he was 2 years old. We had to amputate his leg and it was so badly crushed and injured. I understand my boyfriend wants me to be close to him, I want that too, but is it really so much to ask for a few months for my cat to pass away? It hurts me so much that he keeps calling me unfair and not committed in this relationship I am. But my longest friend is dying, and I want him to be comfortable. He doesn't seem to grasp how important my cat is to me. He has never liked cats, and even made the joke, when he's gone I will finally be your number one man. I don't know how to handle this at all. Any advice is welcome. Comments. Comment 1. If he has a dog, how can he not understand what it's like to love an animal? Oop. He doesn't think cats actually have emotions or something. He's one of those people who thinks cats are evil and dogs are a saving grace, which was fine before. I understand not liking cats is almost as common as liking them. Comment 2. Je comprends qu'il pourrait ne pas aimer le chat lui-même mais pas pourquoi il ne comprend pas comment vous vous sentez à propos du chat. Comment 3. I don't think it's unreasonable. After 16 years the cat is part of the family. Of course you want to make his passing as easy and safe as possible. If he doesn't get it, frankly, he sounds like a tool. Update, 1 day later. First off, let me say I'm still shaking, so if this is a rambled mess, I am sorry. All your kind words from yesterday made me cry. Thank you all so much. I thought I would give some backstory to how my BF and I met. It was through a support group, as I mentioned. Growing up, until age 7, I had a very abusive dad. When I was 7, he tried to kill my mother and I. Luckily, the cops intervened and they took him away. My mom charged him and he got put away. When the trial was done, we moved, and my mom gave me Moo, don't judge the name, I was 8, from a local shelter. I didn't fit in at the new school, and Moo was the best thing in my life. Back to the support group. I shared my story, and my BF confronted me after saying he also had abusive parents growing up, and we bonded over our similar situations. I didn't realize how much control he had over me until recently. He convinced me to stop seeing my therapist. We also stopped going to group. He used to tell me what to wear, how to style my hair, it's very curly, and recently I've been straightening it because he would always say it looked better. A few hours ago, I invited him over for lunch and to talk. Luckily, Moo was in my room sleeping. I told him what you guys said, saying that if it was his dog he would be upset. He blew up. He told me that wasn't the point. The point was I wasn't committed to him, or didn't care about us. He started throwing things, a glass, some books I had lying about, and some picture frames. It was terrifying. I had never seen him this angry before, and I just reverted back to what I used to do as a kid. Curl up, cover yourself as much as you can, stay quiet. Bless my roommate, who came home during this fit. She had brought the security guard because as she was walking in she heard the shouting, items breaking. My BF was escorted out. As he left I just screamed, "Don't come back. I hope it sticks." I've blocked his number, and my landlady has been notified not to let him in, as have the guards. Next step is neighbors. I don't really know what to do from here. I emailed my therapist, hopefully she will let me come back. My mom is on the way over right now, and my roommate is with me too. I'm so terrified. I didn't realize how much control he had over me. I thought all his early behavior was just because he had clingy issues from his own upbringing. I'm going to have a bath, relax, let my hair go curly again, and cuddle my baby. I'm really glad Moo was in my room. Thank you all for the help. I didn't think any of this was wrong until you guys brought it up. I still love him, and feel bad for him. He had a shit upbringing too, and I'm sure he's messed up from it, but I'm going to try to move on. After my cat dies, I'm going to move out from this place, to somewhere he doesn't know about. Thank you all again. Edit for everyone who wants to see Moo. Copy from another comment. I don't want to be identified in case anyone I know or in the future knows finds this. That's why I made a throwaway, as I do have a regular Reddit account. Imagine this. A pretty big tomcat, mainly white with 3 huge black spots on his back, leg, and side of his head. Minus the back right leg, and yellow eyes. An 8-year-old me thought he looked like a cow, and cows moo, hence the name Moo. He's pretty derpy, but he's mine. Edit 2. Moved to tears again by all your comments. Thank you. I'm going to log off this account now, and hopefully never have a reason to use it again. Thank you all so much for the help, I love you all. Comments. Comment 1. As distressing as it must have been for you, I'm so glad he finally showed his true colors, but even more so that you were brave enough to end things for good. You're a strong woman, and getting back to therapy will make you stronger and more aware of the intentions of any future abusers who may want to prey on you because of what you've been through. BW. Curly hair is gorgeous. Seriously, wear your curls with pride. Comment 2. Sorry you had to find out he sucks that way up. Stick to your guns and don't let him back in, he is controlling and most likely could have become physical if not for your roommate coming. Don't let the sob stories from him get to you. Comment 3. Yep, he was trying to separate OP from Moo because they always try to take away our support systems. He couldn't stand that there was anything you loved more than him. Good riddance and stay strong, OP. Comment 4. I'm pretty sure this comment will get lost among the others, but maybe you'll see it, and I think you need all the support right now, no matter how small. I'm sure it's hard to let him go and you still love him. It's not like you can fall out of love in a matter of seconds. But please stay strong and don't take him back under any circumstances. I'm sure you already know this, as you seem like an extremely bright and sensible lady, just maybe you need to read this in a weaker moment. Surround yourself with all the support you can, family, friends, therapy, take legal action if needed. I don't care how shit his upbringing was. It might be a reason to be abusive, but never an excuse. Don't let history repeat itself. Take care. Cuddle your buddy? Oop. Thank you. My mom got here a while ago and she said the same thing. Don't end up like she did. It's scary how I almost went into the same cycle. I love him, but some of the things he screamed at me, I hate that cat, I'll kill him, amongst others, scared me. I could never expose my cat to that. I won't go back to someone who would hurt something so close to me. Update commenting in a Boru in the other sub, 6.5 years later. Hi everyone. This is kinda crazy. I was on my regular Reddit account, I am an avid follower of this subreddit, when I saw my own post on here. I thought I would give some updates. Moo died around 4 months after this post. He was put down, since his quality of life was declining rapidly, and while he could have lived maybe another 3 or 4 months, I didn't want that for him. He was in the last stages of kidney disease, and needed so many drugs of subcutaneous hydration to just keep him going. I miss him every single day. I still have his ashes with me, and I make sure to keep him in a sunbeam on the window. That was his favorite thing. Regarding my ex, the embarrassing part of it is, I still felt so badly for him for so long. I saw a comment on the original post that said it sounded like I was just looking for validation that his behavior wasn't okay, and I think that's true. Besides controlling my hair, he also pretty much decided everything in our relationship. What we did together, what we ate, shows we watched. It seemed so small at the time, that he never wanted to go to the places I picked or listen to the music I liked. He always had a reason at first, but then eventually it was just because he didn't want to do those things. And for some reason I let that happen. I did try to go back to that therapist and the group, but even after I told her and them what happened, I felt unsafe being there. For the first few months, he would stake out my apartment, and I couldn't trust he wasn't also following me to therapy. Maybe stakeout isn't the right word, but he would leave letters and packages and stuff outside my building, so I knew he was there. Could be there at any time. Cops were not helpful since he never made himself known to me, although my roommate swears she saw him a couple times across the street. Basically just said to be careful. My therapist and I moved to phone calls, for a while. I don't know if this will surprise anyone, but turns out XBF was into the no sugar. A lot of our fights I now think he was high for at least some of them, especially the last blow up. He ended up getting in a fight with some dudes at a bar and he was fucked up when booked. This was probably about a month or so after Moo died. I broke my lease, which my roommate, who I am still friends with, was really nice about. I moved back in with my mom, lives in a different town, for a few months, before finding another job just one town over from her. This was her suggestion. She wanted to keep an eye on me and make sure I didn't let him back into my life. She was and is my rock to this day. He got out after only a few months for good behavior, and while he didn't know where I lived, I am extremely thankful for my mom. There are times when I would hear that his experience changed him, via PPL I knew, and I would think, maybe he has changed. I was so lonely without Moo. My mom nipped those in the bud every time. She would ask me things like, even if you go back, what then? You get married and have kids? Do you think he would be a good father? It was sobering to think of what I experienced as a child being continued. Eventually I steeled myself with the help of a new therapist, suggested from my old one, and worked on my self-confidence a lot. About what I deserve. When COVID hit, I had a lot of time to kind of break down parts of my life I didn't before. I have tried being in relationships since, but there was this underlying feeling of stress in each one. About 2 years ago I figured out I think I am asexual. Sex was always so uncomfortable for me, even when it was physically enjoyable I never really wanted the act. I just assumed this was trauma and fear of intimacy. That is what most people and therapists had told me. I am currently in a relationship with a lovely person, NB, and we are both asexual. We do kiss, but we rarely ever move beyond that. With them, there is no expectation for more. They are also from a less than happy childhood. They were in the foster system, but that isn't my story to share, so I won't. Just know that I am happy. We have been together for a year, and they are so considerate and kind. They bring me flowers at least once a month, they make sure I can express myself, they encourage my interests and actually want to hear about them. Most of all, they love my curly hair, and they love cats. I never adopted another cat after Moo. I think I was terrified for a long time that if I did, they could be used against me. My partner has 2 cats, who I love. We are currently trying to work out moving in together. My place has a better location, but theirs is larger. We've decided to try and find a completely new place together that we can both agree on, but the process for rentals right now is horrid. There have been 2 places so far that we applied to and didn't get. Anyway, my life is going great. I still have lots of trauma that I live with, but I know I can get back up when I fall. I have people I love, who also love me. I probably won't respond to any comments, And I'll most likely delete this account in a few days. I don't need it anymore. But before I did, I thought leaving one last update was called for. Thank you for all your kind words, and helping me find confidence to get out of that relationship. Much love to everyone. My wife called me, just a roommate, dismissing our marriage. But when I discovered her cheating, I made her leave the house for good. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's simple, free, and allows us to keep bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let us keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the video. Okay, so 30 million, need to get this off my chest because things have completely gone wrong with my wife, Melissa, 28F. We've been married for 3 years and together for nearly 6. We first met in this bar through mutual friends. She wasn't supermodel hot, but she was obviously lovely and exuded a confident air that drew me in immediately. We hit it off, exchanged numbers, and began dating a few weeks later. The first couple years were actually pretty fantastic. We went on weekend getaways and met each other's families, as couples do. Her parents were a little standoffish, but whatever. We moved in together after a year. I proposed on our 2-year anniversary, and we married around 8 months later in a simple ceremony with family and close friends. I purchased a home around 6 months before the wedding. My name appears on everything since I paid the down payment with money I saved by working my ass off. For the first year of marriage, everything was well. We'd both come home from work, cook dinner together, and watch television, normal stuff. We discussed having children in a few years, but looking back, I noticed that things began to change around the 2nd year of our marriage. Melissa began to focus more on her work. She works in marketing and has started staying later at work, attending networking events, and spending less time at home. I was supportive because I thought it was good for her career. I took on extra domestic tasks so she could focus on her work. I also started paying most of the bills because she stated that she wanted to advance her job before focusing on money. It started out little, with her canceling our date evenings at the last minute due to work. She was constantly on her phone, even while we were meant to be spending time together. If I brought it up, she'd become defensive and suggest I wasn't supporting her profession. So I backed off. We stopped doing activities together on weekends. She was either too exhausted from work or had unexpected brunches and shopping outings with her pals, which I was not invited to. I began to feel as if we were simply existing in the same area without truly connecting. She told me a few months ago that her buddy group was planning a meal at a new restaurant downtown and invited me. I was genuinely surprised. She hadn't invited me to anything with her pals in months. I wasn't very excited because her buddies are largely marketing public relations professionals who only discuss work turmoil and gossip about people I don't know. But I assumed this was her way of including me more, so I went. We arrived at the restaurant and there were around 8 people in total. Melissa, me, and 6 of her friends. The room was crowded and noisy, and we ended up at this long table. I was around 3 seats away from Melissa, sandwiched between her buddy Taylor, who was chatting to someone else the entire time, and a guy I had never met before, who was addicted to his phone. Basically, I was simply sitting there sipping my soda, without participating in any conversation. No one spoke to me or even acknowledged my existence. To be honest, these things are rather usual. I was used to being the unseen husband by this point. I was spacing out, thinking about a job at work, when Melissa's friend Caitlin inquired, "So, how's married life treating you these days?" The way she stated it was strange, as if there was something underlying the question. That's when I focused on what Melissa was saying. Guys, I swear it felt like someone punched me in the stomach. Melissa snorted dismissively and replied, "Oh, please. He's just my roommate at this point. Only my roommate." I literally froze with my beer halfway to my mouth. Who is saying that about their husband? And the way she said it was not a joke. It was as if she were stating an obvious fact that everyone already knew. She even looked at me as she said it, noticing I was paying attention, but she didn't mind. What's worse? Her friends' reactions. They all laughed and nodded as if everything was perfectly normal. One of them even said, "Don't all husbands eventually become glorified roommates?" They all cracked up even more. All but one girl, Olivia. She's new to their friend group, I've only met her a few times. She did not laugh. Instead, she gave me a sympathetic gaze. At least one person in this group had a soul, I suppose. I can't remember the rest of the dinner talk. My brain was caught on loop, hearing my wife repeatedly refer to me as her roommate. I continued to eat and drink on autopilot, not saying anything but attempting to understand what had just transpired. The trouble is, she said it without looking at me. She didn't ask if I'd heard, and she didn't care, as if I wasn't even a factor in her life worth considering. Melissa was speaking about trivial topics on the way home, appearing entirely normal, while I sat there feeling as if my entire marriage had been nuked. I scarcely answered, only offering one-word answers and nods. When we arrived home, she plopped down on the couch and scrolled through Instagram like nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just completely degraded our entire relationship in front of all her pals. I stood there for a minute, waiting for her to say something, recognize what she said, apologize, anything. But nah. Nothing. That's when it occurred to me, perhaps this wasn't just a random comment. Maybe this is how she sees me? Just a man who stays in the same house and pays his bills. Not her spouse, not her partner, only her roommate. I couldn't keep it in anymore. So, am I really just your roommate now? I inquired, attempting to seem casual despite my feelings. Melissa looked up from her phone, angry to be interrupted. What are you talking about? At dinner, you told your friends I'm just your roommate at this point. She rolled her eyes and returned to scrolling. Oh my God, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive. That's just how we talk sometimes. Didn't sound like a joke, I said. Well, it was, she retorted. You're seriously overreacting. Can we not do this right now? I'm tired. And that was all. No apologies. There's no explanation. Not even acknowledging that it might have harmed me. Simply disregarding my feelings and making it appear as if I was at blame for being sad. I didn't want to exacerbate the situation because I was still trying to process everything. Plus, I wanted to consider how to approach this. But one thing was clear, something was badly wrong in our relationship, and I couldn't deny it any longer. The next morning, I followed my usual routine on autopilot. Melissa was hurrying around as usual, barely addressing me, except to inquire whether I had seen her phone charger. It was just another routine day for her. As I drove to work, I kept revisiting that moment from supper in my thoughts. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I've worked hard for years to construct a life with this woman. I purchased the house we live in. I pay the majority of the bills. I've been assisting her career by taking on additional domestic tasks. I've been the one who has put the most effort into our connection. Meanwhile, she has been doing what? Going out with pals? Working late? Paying little attention to me? And this is how she views me? Just a guy who happens to reside in the same house? By the time I arrived at work, I had made a decision. If Melissa prefers a roommate above a husband, she will get one. During my lunch break, I opened a new bank account and transferred the majority of our money from our joint account to it. I only left enough to meet my portion of the bills for the month, not a penny more. I used to pay 80% of everything because I earned more. But roommates split the bill 50-50, right? When I went home that evening, I didn't ask Melissa about her day as I usually would. I did not inform her about my. I simply said hey, and went directly to the spare room where I keep my gaming gear. Usually, I'd wait for her to complete work before we decided on dinner. But not tonight. I ordered a pizza just for myself. When it arrived, I took a few slices and returned to my game. Melissa entered the room a few minutes later, bewildered. Did you order pizza? Where's mine? I shrugged, still staring at my tablet. Oh, I just ordered for myself. Figured you'd get something if you were hungry. She waited there for a second, hoping for a more detailed explanation. When I said nothing else, she just murmured, okay, and exited the room. A bit later, I heard her in the kitchen preparing something. That marked the beginning of what I now call Operation Roommate. Over the next few weeks, I gradually changed how I interacted with Melissa. I stopped texting her during the day to check in. I stopped getting groceries for her. I stopped washing her clothes with mine. I stopped asking whether she needed anything when I went shopping. I stopped telling her when I was going out or when I would return home. I stopped cooking dinner for both of us. Essentially, I stopped doing all the husband's things and began acting like we were just two people sharing a shared space, like housemates. Melissa didn't appear to notice right away. Or if she did, she said nothing. She still went out a lot. Still working late. Even when she was at home, she was glued to her phone. However, after approximately a week, things began to alter. One night, she came home, opened the fridge, and gave me an irritated expression. Melissa's buddy was the only one who appeared uncomfortable when Melissa introduced me as her roommate at supper. Hey, Jake, right? She said, walking over. Melissa's husband? I nodded. Yeah, hey, Olivia. She grinned, surprised. I remember your name. Good memory. Didn't know you came here every morning. Their coffee is better than the office stuff. There was an awkward moment. I could sense she wanted to say something but was unsure whether she should. Finally, she stated, "I've been trying to contact out. Melissa's comments at the dinner a few weeks earlier were inappropriate. I simply wanted you to know that not everyone felt it was hilarious. I was surprised that someone acknowledged it. Thanks, I appreciate that. Are you all okay?" "I mean, it's not my business." I shrugged. "We're figuring things out." No way was I going to put my marital issues on someone I barely knew, even if she appeared pleasant. Olivia nodded. "Well, I hope everything works out. For what it's worth, I think you seem like a gentleman." This made me grin for the first time in weeks. "Thanks, Olivia." We ended up sitting together for about 15 minutes, just talking, and it turns out she's actually pretty cool. She works as a physical therapist, arrived to the city about 6 months ago, and met Melissa and her group through a common friend. She was easy to talk to, and it felt good to have a real conversation with someone who actually cared about what I had to say. She hesitated before saying, "Look, I know this might be weird, but if you ever need someone to talk to, here's my number." She scrawled it on a napkin and gave it to me. I honestly felt it was a bit strange, like crossing a line. I didn't know precisely what her aim was, but I thought I could use some aid. It also appeared like she was just being polite. "Thanks," I replied, slipping it into my pocket. "I might take you up on that." A few days later, I was having an especially frustrating day. Melissa had become increasingly irritated by the roommate situation, grumbling about having to contribute more to bills and calling me juvenile. Then, I discovered that someone had used our joint credit card, which I believed had been revoked but evidently wasn't, to purchase a $500 purse. 3 guesses who? I was sitting in my car in the office parking lot, angry, when I remembered Olivia's phone number and decided to call her. Perhaps she knew what Melissa was doing. So I messaged her. "Hey, this is Jake. Is the offer to chat still open?" She replied almost instantly. "Absolutely. Is everything okay?" We met for coffee after work. I didn't intend to dump everything on her, but staring into her huge, warm eyes, it all came out. The roommate joke, how Melissa had been distant for months, and how I'd initiated Operation Roommate. All of it. Olivia simply listened, asking occasional questions rather than passing judgment. When I finished, she sighed. "I don't know Melissa very well, but based on what I've seen in the group, she talks about you differently when you aren't present." My stomach plummeted. "How come?" Olivia expressed discomfort, saying, "She complains a lot and says you're boring. She feels stuck." Wow. I wasn't sure what else to say. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything." "No, I appreciate your honesty. Seriously." Before we went, she touched my arm. "Jake, you deserve someone who's proud to be with you, not someone who treats you like an inconvenience." That hit me hard, because she was correct. For the first time, I saw Olivia. Not simply as Melissa's friend. Not just as someone who happens to be present. But as someone who observed me, who saw the cracks before I even acknowledged they existed. We began messaging after that. It was just regular conversation, how the day went, little annoyances, inside jokes, but it seemed different. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just talking to fill the silence. Someone wanted to hear what I had to say. No sighing. No eye rolls. Just a real chat with someone who cares. And man, I didn't realize how much I missed it till I got it back. Of course, Melissa didn't notice. She was too caught up in her own world, going out many nights a week with business pals, getting home late, and smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. I was not foolish. I knew where this was going, but I wanted proof before making my next step. Now, let me be clear. I'm not the suspicious kind. Really, I am not. I've been cheated on before, back in college, and I promised myself I wouldn't be that anxious partner who constantly checks phones. However, there is a distinction between being paranoid and just connecting obvious dots. Melissa was displaying all the traditional signs. Staying out late. She is being clandestine with her phone. I suddenly made new work buddies that I had never met before. Getting suited for office meetings. The cologne fragrance. I mean, come on. I needed to know for sure. The setup first, I attempted a straightforward approach. "So, who is this new work friend you have been spending so much time with?" I asked casually one morning. Melissa barely glanced up from her phone. "What?" "Oh, simply members of the marketing staff. No one is interesting. Seems like you're with them a lot lately." She rolled her eyes. "What are you doing with my schedule now?" She then smirked and created air quotes with her fingers. "I thought we were only roommates." I merely shrugged and walked away. "Just making conversation," I said. It was clear that the straight approach would not work. So I made a decision that some people may condemn me for. But, whatever. I purchased an AirTag. If you're unfamiliar with the term, it refers to a little tracking gadget manufactured by Apple. You're intended to use it to find your keys or baggage, but people also use it for other purposes. I waited for a morning when Melissa was still asleep. Her automobile keys were on the counter, as usual. I quickly took them, inserted the AirTag into a little compartment in the center console, where she stores spare cash and receipts, and returned the keys. The whole thing took about 30 seconds. The truth comes out. Melissa texted the next day, stating she'd be working late again and asked not to wait. The timing was ideal for testing my new setup. Around 6 p.m., I launched the Find My app on my phone to verify the AirTag's location. It showed that her automobile was on the move. I watched her drive, not toward her downtown workplace. But I'm going to a luxury apartment complex on the city's north side. Her automobile came to a stop about 6:45 p.m. My heart pounded. Part of me hoped for an innocent explanation, like a friend living there or a work event, but deep down I knew. I watched her movements for 3 days and discovered a clear pattern. Tuesday, she told me she was having dinner with co-workers. Her car was at the same apartment complex from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Thursday, she said she had a client meeting. Car was at the apartment complex from 6:30 p.m. to nearly midnight. Throughout all of this, I texted Olivia, not telling her what I was doing, but screaming about Melissa's blatant lies. Olivia was supportive but cautious. "Are you certain you want to know?" She texted. "Sometimes, finding out only makes things worse." "I need to know," I told him. "I'm tired of being played for a fool." The following Tuesday, when Melissa stated she had another late meeting, I told her I was going to grab drinks with some guys from work and wouldn't be home till late, which was obviously a lie. Instead, I parked down the street from the apartment complex and waited. Melissa's car arrived at 6:30 p.m., and I watched as she parked, checked her cosmetics in the mirror, got out, and walked to one of the buildings, typing a code at the door and entering. I sat there for maybe 15 minutes, debating what to do next. Part of me wanted to storm in, catch them in the act, and make a big scene, but what would that accomplish? More drama? No thanks. Instead, I took pictures of her car in the lot and the building she entered, then took a deep breath and drove home. Melissa was cheating on me, and now I had all the proof I needed. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I called Olivia on the way home, and when she answered, I simply stated, "You were right about everything." "Oh, Jake," she whispered softly. "I am so sorry. What are you planning to do?" "I don't know yet," I told her. "But I'm done being just her roommate." I slept in the spare room that night, and Melissa didn't notice I wasn't in our bed when she arrived home after midnight. The following day, I called in ill to work because I couldn't concentrate on spreadsheets and meetings when my marriage was collapsing. I spent the morning researching divorce lawyers and found one with positive reviews who could see me that afternoon. When I got down with him, I explained everything: the roommate comment, the infidelity, the housing issue, and our money. "So, what am I looking at here?" I inquired after explaining everything. The lawyer leaned back in his chair and said, "Well, you're in a fairly solid legal position. The house is in your name, and you owned it before marriage, therefore it is probably protected. Having no children simplifies things. Virginia is not a no-fault state, thus her adultery could benefit you. The important question is, how contentious do you want this to be?" I considered it. "I don't want drama. I just want out." The lawyer smirked. "You're a smart man. Those who want vengeance end up paying me a lot more money." He then gave me a knowing glance. "Let's start drafting the paperwork. Meanwhile, document everything. Her absences, evidence of the affair, and financial documents. And don't tell her you're filing until we're prepared." I paid his retainer and departed feeling lighter, as if I'd finally taken control of the problem. When I arrived home, Olivia texted me. "How are you doing?" I proposed we meet for coffee, and she accepted. We met at a quiet small area a few towns away, where Melissa's pals wouldn't notice us. Olivia looked troubled when she saw me. "You look exhausted," she remarked. "Haven't been sleeping much," I admitted, absently stirring my coffee. "I met with a divorce lawyer today." Her eyes widened. "Wow, that was fast." Once I learned for certain about the cheating, it wasn't a difficult decision. Our marriage has been dead for several months. She nodded. "I understand, but it's still a big step." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, a swift, encouraging gesture that seemed more genuine than any contact I'd had from Melissa in months. "What happens now?" she asked. A lawyer is preparing the papers. I am gathering evidence. Then I serve her and ask her to go. She's not going to like that. I shrugged. Tough. She should have considered that before cheating on me. We talked for nearly 2 hours, not only about the divorce but about everything. Our careers, kids, favorite movies, and vacation adventures. It was so easy to chat to Olivia. There was no judgment, no stress, just two individuals who were truly interested in what the other had to say. When we eventually said our goodbyes, she hugged me and whispered, "You'll be fine, Jake." Better than okay. For the first time in weeks, I truly believed it. Over the next few days, I kept gathering evidence, taking screenshots of our bank statements proving I paid for everything, downloading records of Melissa's credit card charges, fancy restaurants I never went to, hotel charges on nights she was supposed to be with friends, and backing up her AirTag location history. Put everything in a folder for my lawyer, Richard. Melissa, on the other hand, was entirely unconcerned, continuing with her usual schedule of getting home late, barely speaking to me, and spending weekends with friends. The arrogance of it all only increased my determination. Olivia and I texted every day at that time. Nothing untoward happened, and I was not going to be a cheater like Melissa. What about Olivia? She was the first person in a long time who genuinely cared about me. And I wasn't going to be a cheater, but we were definitely getting closer. She told me about her previous relationships, her difficult family, and I opened up about things I hadn't told anyone in years. She made me laugh when I didn't think I could, and I thought it was nice to have someone supportive through all of this. The divorce papers were ready a week later, and the lawyer suggested that Melissa be served unexpectedly, preferably with a witness present. "You want someone there who can verify how it went down," he told me. "Especially if she gets emotional or makes threats." Well, without thinking twice, I requested Olivia to be my witness. She consented quickly. "I'll be there," she texted, "whatever you need." I chose the date for Friday night, knowing Melissa would be home. It was time to end this farce of a marriage once and for all. Friday arrived faster than I expected, and I spent the morning going over the plan with the lawyer, making sure I understood exactly what to say and how to handle various circumstances. He handed me the divorce papers in a manila envelope that felt far too light for something so significant. Olivia sent me supportive texts throughout the day. "You can do this. Stay strong. I'll be there." Simple words, but they were helpful. We decided to meet at a coffee shop near my house at 6 p.m. Melissa normally arrived home around 7 p.m. on Fridays, when she wasn't going straight to her jerk's place, and the plan was for Olivia to come over around 6:30, after which we'd wait for Melissa together. We remained there for a while, not really drinking our coffees, just passing the time, and at 6:25, we drove to my house. Olivia's automobile was far finer than I expected, a luxury SUV that must have cost a fortune. We came into the house, and I paused for a moment. It seemed strange having Olivia, Melissa's old friend, in our space. Except it wasn't our space anymore, and Olivia wasn't Melissa's friend anymore. I gave her a quick tour, pointing out different objects to break the stillness. She grinned, that little knowing smile. "You don't have to give me the real estate agent walkthrough, Jake. I'm only here for moral support." I chuckled and rubbed the back of my neck. "Yeah, guess I'm just not accustomed to, someone truly wants to be here." She angled her head, as if she were reading between the lines, and then, as we came to a halt in the living room, she reached out and adjusted my shirt collar, smoothing it down with a slight touch as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I froze. But the way she did it, so familiar and casual, made my gut knot. It had been a long time since someone touched me with affection rather than obligation. "There," she whispered, her fingertips lingering for just a second too long before she stepped back. "You're all set." I gulped and tried to ignore the heat rising up my neck. Thanks." She just smirked and plopped down on the couch, as if she had always belonged there. "Anytime." And just like that, I started seeing Olivia in a way I hadn't before. Around 7:10, I heard Melissa's car pull into the driveway. Olivia and I were sitting in the living room, the divorce papers neatly put out on the coffee table waiting. Everything was in place. The front door opened, and Melissa walked in as casually as ever, taking a few steps before she noticed us. Then halted, her eyes shifting from me to Olivia and back again. "What is going on?" she asked, her tone already defensive. "Why is she here?" I stood up and said, "We need to talk, Melissa." Her gaze clouded as she glanced at Olivia once more. "Why is she here for that? This is our house." "She's here as a witness," I added, picking up the envelope and allowing her to sense the gravity of the situation before passing it over. Melissa folded her arms. "A witness to what?" I handed her the paperwork and said, "I'm filing for divorce." The way her expression plummeted was priceless, as if her brain had short-circuited and was fumbling for an answer. "Divorce?" she echoed. She scoffed, as if grasping at straws. "Are you serious? Are you over your little roommate tantrum?" "No," I answered, unshaken. "Because you're cheating on me, and have been for months." She gave out a sharp, forced laugh. "That's ridiculous. I am not cheating on you." "Don't," I interrupted her performance. "I know about the guy at the Parkview Apartments. I know how frequently you're there." Her face lost its color. "Did you follow me?" "What the hell, Jake?" I shook my head, amused by how fast she transferred the blame. "I didn't need to." I tapped my phone. "I have weeks of proof. Every late night. Every business function. Every ladies' night out. All leading to the same place." Her eyes shifted to Olivia, then back to me, and her shock turned into rage. "Did you trace me? That is crazy." She then pointed toward Olivia, spitting the words as if they would burn. "So you brought her here for this?" She had been yearning for this moment since the day she met you. Olivia did not react. She did not have to. I wasn't going to let Melissa change the script. "Olivia has nothing to do with this," I said with confidence. "This is about you, your choices, and the fact that you got caught." Melissa's arms tightened across her chest, shifting gears. "So I botched up. Jake, sometimes people make mistakes. That doesn't mean we throw everything away." Her voice softened and her gaze focused on mine. "We can repair this. Counseling, a fresh start, I'll stop seeing him. Let's talk about it alone." She gave Olivia a stare as if she could remove her from the room. That was when I twisted the knife. I leaned back and gave her the same blank stare she'd given me so many times. "Why are you upset anyway?" I inquired, my tone tinged with contempt. "I'm just your roommate, right? That's what you wanted." She scoffed and rolled her eyes, as if I were the one being ridiculous. "That? You're still mad about that, Jake?" "It was a joke." I nodded as if I had finally understood her argument. "Oh, right. It was a joke. Hilarious." I tilted my head. "Wait, so you do joke about replacing your husband with another guy?" "Just checking." Her jaw tightened, but I was not finished. "You were right though," I said, my voice silky. "We're just roommates, and since I'm the one paying the majority of the rent..." I motioned toward the door. "Yeah, I'm going to need you to pack up and get the hell out of my house." She totally lost it. I started crying, screaming, throwing things, the works. He called me every name in the book, then went begging, and then back to fury. Classic manipulative tactics may have worked on me in the past, but not longer. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked repeatedly, as if it were my responsibility to fix. I shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe your boyfriend's place. You seem to spend enough time there already." That just made her angrier. She eventually stormed out, slamming the door so forcefully that a picture tumbled from the wall. Olivia assisted me in cleaning up the mess Melissa had left behind. "That went about as well as expected," I said, attempting a joke. Olivia offered me a compassionate grin. "You did great. Stood your ground." Melissa returned the next day with her friend Taylor, intending to simply move back in like nothing had happened. I'd replaced the locks. They were stuck outside, calling my phone and knocking on the door. I didn't respond, instead texting her that she could come grab her belongings on Saturday, when I'd have my brother with me. That Saturday was tense. My brother Mike arrived early, which was fortunate given that Melissa arrived with Taylor and her father. At Christmas dinner, my parents sat me at the kids' table, proving they saw me as less. Fed up, I left, ignoring their guilt-tripping messages. I had a feeling this Christmas dinner would be a fiasco from the moment I walked in. It's not like I didn't know what I was getting into, it's always the same. This year, I was determined to persevere in the face of challenges. Let me introduce myself. I am Maya, the youngest of 4 siblings. However, being the youngest has never meant anything nice or cute in my family. If anything, it has always been the reason people speak down to me. I'm used to it by this time. I'm 28, but to them, I'm still a baby. I don't have a partner or children like my older siblings, but I'm successful in other ways. I have a career I'm proud of, a small but devoted network of friends, and a sense of freedom others don't understand. Marriage and children have always been more important to them than anything else. Christmas dinner has always been a major event in our household. It's one of the rare times of year that we all get together at my parents' house, a large old Victorian home that has been in the family for generations. A house that appears great in family photos but is a pain to clean. I've always despised the location. It's cold and distant, much like my parents. But it is a custom, so I go every year, even though I would rather be somewhere else. I go because of family. I arrived just after everyone else. My oldest brother, Chris, had already arrived with his wife and 3 children, loudly setting up the table as if they owned the room. Then there was Amy, my sister, with her husband and their baby, always flawless, polished, and flaunting their ideal lifestyle. My parents were in the kitchen, scurrying around, pretending to have everything under control but still making everyone feel like they were 5 years old. As usual, I entered discreetly, hoping to escape the drama that was bound to ensue. When my mother spotted me, her face brightened up with that phony smile she always gave me, the one that made me feel like I wasn't really welcome, simply tolerated for the sake of the holidays. "Maya, sweetie," she said, giving me an embrace that seemed more compulsory than genuine. "I'm delighted you could make it. Grab a seat." I hardly had time to react when my father called from the other room, his voice booming with power, as if to remind everyone that he was still the man of the house. "Dinner's almost ready. Chris, Amy, please get the kids situated." I stood there for a time, not sure what to do. I wished to say something, but it was Christmas. I did not want to cause a scene, not yet. That's when my mother, in her subtle manner of making everything feel like a lesson, spoke again. "Maya, why don't you sit at the children's table? We've got a unique place for you among the cousins." I froze. I could not believe it. My mother, in her sweet syrupy tone, had just asked me to sit at the kids' table, which they set up every year with a mismatched assortment of chairs, paper plates, and half-hearted decorations. I looked across to the dining room. The adult table was nicely decorated, with exquisite china, wine glasses, and candles that gave the atmosphere an elegant, grown-up feel. My dad sat at the head of the table, looking as smug as usual, surrounded by my married siblings. There is no room for me, however. I returned my gaze to my mother, attempting to suppress the rage that was welling up within me. I could feel the familiar sting, the one I get whenever they try to remind me that I'm not good enough in their eyes. This wasn't the first time they'd made me feel small, but it was unique. This wasn't a casual remark or a side-eye. This was deliberate. They knew exactly what they were doing. I attempted a smile, but it did not reach my eyes. "Okay, Mom." "Thank you," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. She smiled as well, but her attitude indicated that she was unconcerned with how I felt. This was all about maintaining appearances and ensuring everything was flawless. I don't believe she recognized how much it hurt to be rejected like this. Without saying anything, I walked up to the children's table, my stomach churning with each step. It wasn't like I anticipated anything different, but for a little moment, I hoped they'd treat me like an adult. I sat in the small plastic chair, surrounded by children who were more concerned with their mashed potatoes than the awkward hush I sensed in the air. My cousins were in their own little universe and utterly ignored me. I looked at the plate in front of me. It was messy and unappetizing. It was as if they hadn't even tried to make it appear good. I swear I saw one of the toddlers slip a portion of broccoli beneath the table. I wanted to shout. That's when it struck me. This wasn't only about the table. This was not about tradition or the Christmas spirit. This was about them thinking I was less than. They didn't even bother to hide it anymore. And at that moment, something inside me snapped. I stood calmly, the weight of my decision weighing against me. I did not need to say anything. I didn't need to yell or cause a scene. I just grabbed my coat, slung it over my shoulder, and strode right to the door. As I opened it, my mother's voice rang out, almost late. "Where are you going, Maya?" she inquired, her tone tinged with bewilderment and annoyance. I did not glance back. "I'm leaving," I announced, my voice frigid. "Enjoy your dinner." The door banged behind me. The cold air hit me like a wave, but I didn't mind. My car was parked just down the street, and I had already left. My parents' panicked calls faded into the distance as I drove. For hours, I wandered aimlessly until I arrived at a quiet diner. Sitting alone in a booth, I ordered something warm, my hands still trembling from adrenaline. I couldn't remember the last time I felt so angry and relieved all at once. That's when my phone started exploding. Messages. I missed calls. As usual? I glanced at the screen. It was my family. Chris, Amy. Everyone, including my father, was phoning and messaging, but the one that stood out the most came from my mother. "Mom. Where are you? We need to talk. This is not humorous, Maya." I felt a smirk tug on my lips, the type that had been building all evening. I was not about to pick up. Not yet. The ball was now in my court. They had no idea what was coming. I put down my phone and sipped my coffee, watching the steam curl up into the air. What should I do next? That was the question. And believe me, they wouldn't like the answer. I waited in that diner for what seemed like an eternity, with my phone beeping every few minutes. The texts became more urgent, with each one attempting to get me back into their little game. Chris sent the first one. Chris. Maya, this is not funny. Where are you now? Then another from Amy. Amy. Mom is freaking out. We simply want you back. Next came my father. Dad. Come on, stop acting like a child. Get back here. I did not respond. I did not owe them an explanation. They had made their decision when they treated me as a second-class person at their special supper. All I wanted was to be treated like an adult, but they decided I was still a baby and needed to be hidden away with the toddlers. After about an hour, I picked up my phone to check my messages again. The tension was building, as if they were realizing I wasn't going to give up easily. My gut twisted when I saw my mother's text. Mom. Maya, I do not understand why you are doing this. Your siblings are concerned, and it's destroying Christmas. Do not make this about you. You are being selfish. I stared at the message for a time, feeling a surge of rage rising again. Selfish? They were the ones acting selfishly. The entire night had been about their image and aspirations. I had only been a component in their flawless little puzzle. However, to her, I was the problem. Typical. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to laugh or cry at this point. Instead, I just blocked her number. She was not going to make me feel guilty, not this time. I took a deep breath and tried to focus on myself. This was not a spontaneous reaction. I had a plan. Every one of them had wronged me, and tonight I was going to make sure they understood how badly they had messed up. Later that evening, after finishing my lunch and the adrenaline had subsided a little, I decided it was time. I opened the family group chat, where they generally vent about everything and anything. There had already been 12 mails concerning me. This is ridiculous. She's acting like a child. What's the big deal? We didn't mean it like that. I think she's just overreacting. I scrolled over them, my fingers itching. I knew I could simply ignore it. That would have been the easiest way out. But no. I needed them to feel it. I needed them to understand that how they treated me had consequences. I began typing slowly at first, but my words soon increased up speed. You guys don't get it, do you? You really don't. This isn't just about a seat at the table, it's about how you've treated me my entire life, like I'm not good enough, like I'm invisible unless you need something from me. I'm the only one who doesn't get praised for following the same script you all did. Get married, have kids, play the game. But I've built my own life, and I'm doing just fine. So maybe it's time you all recognize that. I waited before sending, allowing the weight of my words to sink in. For the first time in my life, I felt in control of the situation. I stopped begging for their approval. I was not going to be their small project. I pressed send. It did not take long for the text to pour in. My phone buzzed repeatedly, each message more frantic than the last. The first one came from my father. Dad. This is crazy, Maya. You're being dramatic. Get over yourself. Amy swiftly followed. Amy. You can't just leave like that without causing everyone to be sad. What did you think would happen? Then Chris joined in. Chris. We did not do anything wrong, Maya. You need to calm yourself and return before you ruin everything with your fury. Each message landed harder than the last. They still didn't understand it. They were still trying to blame me, claiming that it was my fault that they treated me so badly. I did not respond. Instead, I did something I had been thinking about for a long time. I launched the Photos app on my phone and began scrolling. There it was. An old photo of our family from years ago, just before everything started to go apart. A great Christmas photograph, with everyone smiling and cheerful. Everyone but me. Of course, I was there, thrust into the image as an afterthought. But I knew the reality beneath their smiles. I understood what had been said. What was implied. All these years. I took that shot and promptly placed it on the family group chat. But this time, I included a caption. Here's to the perfect family, always making sure the youngest one knows their place. Then I shut off the phone. I let the silence settle about me, feeling liberated from their restraints. I had no idea what would happen next, and I didn't care. They pushed me too far. And now I was finished. I didn't check my phone for several hours. It was almost weird sitting there without the incessant buzzing and pinging of their urgent texts. The silence seemed strangely calming. For once, I wasn't the one attempting to please them. I stayed awake late, just thinking. I knew exactly what they'd be saying behind my back, even if they didn't have the courage to say it to my face. My siblings, particularly Chris, undoubtedly believed I was exaggerating, certain I was just being the drama queen of the family again. But I was not. I was finished performing the character they had written for me. What if they couldn't understand that? Well, I'd let them deal with the consequences. I eventually plugged in my phone to charge and sighed as I checked it again. The notifications were as relentless as I had expected. Dozens of missed calls, texts ranging from angry to apologetic, but they were all tinged with frustration. I scanned through them, reading their words with grim delight. They were unraveling. And I wasn't about to make it simple for them to put things back together. Mom sent the longest text. "I don't know what's gotten into you, Maya. You're acting like this is about us when it's really about you. You can't just run away from your family like this. You're tearing us apart. Please come back. Christmas is ruined without you. This isn't who you are." There it was. Guilt trip. The attempt to make me the bad guy. They always made me feel like I was the one making trouble by demanding to be treated like an adult. Then came my father's message. "This is childish. We need to talk about this when you calm down. And of course, Chris, if you think walking out of dinner was going to make a statement, you're wrong. You're making it worse. You owe us an apology." An apology? For what? For finally sticking up for myself? For demanding to be treated equally in a family that only respected me when it suited them? I was not sorry for anything. But then Amy left a message. It differed from the others. It was neither angry nor demanding. It was almost imploring. "Maya, I know you're upset, and I understand why. But this isn't the way to fix things. You're my sister, and I love you, but you're pushing everyone away. Please just come home. We can talk about this. It's Christmas, for God's sake." I looked at her words for a while. I'd always been close to Amy. When I was a kid, she was the one who defended me when the others banded together against me. What about now? Now I was unsure whether I could ever trust her again. Not after everything she'd let go. Everything she had silently supported when she knew it was wrong. I took a deep breath while my thumb hovered over the screen. I wanted to respond. I wanted to reassure her that I wasn't being theatrical or making problems. That I was advocating for myself. I was tired of being treated as if I were the family's perpetual child, but I did not. Not yet. Instead, I typed a quick response. "I'll think about it." I sent it and put down my phone, feeling a stab of remorse. But I shook it off. I knew I couldn't return to that table unless their perceptions of me shifted dramatically. And I wasn't going to let them brush it under the rug like it was nothing. The next morning, I received even more texts. Some were from family friends who wanted to know where I was. They were really worried, but I didn't want to explain myself to anyone who wasn't involved in the situation. And then there was a torrent of calls from my mother. But one message stood out. It came from Amy. "Maya, I've been talking to Chris and Mom, and they're pretty upset. And honestly, so am I. We are a family, and you cannot simply distance yourself from us. If you don't return home soon, things will get worse. Please don't make this any more complicated than it needs to be." Increased pressure, increased manipulation, and I still didn't grasp what I was going through. They were not hearing me. They were not listening. I knew exactly what they were doing, what they have always done. They were attempting to guilt me into returning. Trying to make me feel like I was the source of all the problems, when, in fact, it was their inability to view me as anything other than the youngest kid that had been the problem all along. I grabbed up my phone, launched the group chat, and stared at the screen. My fingers paused over the keyboard as I considered what to say. I wanted to convey my point. To let them understand why I was fed up with their mistreatment of me. However, the fact was, I wasn't sure I was ready to return yet. Not until I knew they had changed. Not until I felt confident they recognized me for who I truly was. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was from my father. "Maya, we need to discuss. You can't keep running away. You're going to regret this." It hit me like a ton of bricks. Same terms. Same deceptive guilt trip. I could feel the tension rising, as if the walls were closing in on me. But I did not answer. Not yet. The day dragged on, and with each hour, I felt the weight of their texts. Their calls. Their attempts to get me back into their orbit. Despite many phone notifications, I maintained my distance. I'd made my choice. And I was not going to let them bully me back into the character they had set me in. As the evening progressed, I found myself sitting alone, staring at the empty chair across from me. If I had gone back, I would have sat in this chair. A part of me, an old part, Wanted to surrender. To go back. To make it nice. It was Christmas after all. It's time for family. To be united. However, I couldn't shake the idea that if I went back now, it would be like saying I was not worth fighting for. That all those years of being put aside were perfectly okay. That they were correct. That I was simply being dramatic. I considered the snapshot I had uploaded in the group conversation. The one where I was forced to grin and pushed to the side like an afterthought. That image had said what I needed to say. I wasn't only upset about tonight. I was outraged since this was how they treated me every year. Every birthday. Every holiday. Every family function, I was banished to the back seat and never allowed a voice. They expected me to simply accept it like I had in the past. But not this time. The phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. I paused, my finger hovering over the decline button. But something inside me urged me to pick up. Perhaps I was finally open to hearing what she had to say. Perhaps I was just curious how far they would go to make me feel bad. I took a deep breath and pushed the green button. Maya, my mother's voice filtered through, exhausted and frustrated. We need to talk. This has gone on long enough. I remained mute, letting the words hang in the air. She waited for me to reply, but I said nothing. Look, she added. We're family. You're making things more complicated than they need to be. I'm not sure what's gotten into you, but you're driving everyone away. Your father is upset. Chris is upset. Amy. She stopped, evidently struggling to find her words. I'm upset, Maya. I nearly laughed. Were they upset? After everything they had put me through, they had the arrogance to say this? I could feel the old rage rising up, but I swallowed it, not wanting to show her how much she still had control over me. I'm not pushing anyone away, Mom, I responded calmly but firmly. I just stopped playing your game. I am not going to sit at the kids' table, be treated as if I am invisible, and pretend everything is fine. She was silent for a moment. I could practically hear her analyzing what I said, trying to find out how to convert the conversation back into a guilt trip. You cannot just leave us waiting like this. Your father is attempting to make Christmas memorable. The entire family is here. It's not just about you, Maya, she eventually added, her tone almost imploring. You're breaking the family apart. You know, I've spent my whole life attempting to make everything work. Trying to fit into the mold that you all made for me. But no one ever saw me, did they? I responded. You did not want me as an adult, Mom. You wanted me to be a small kid forever. And tonight was the final straw. She was silent again, and for the first time, I could see she was listening to what I was saying. It was more than just a seat at the dinner table. It was about how I had been treated throughout my life. I'm sorry, Maya, she finally admitted. But her voice was faint and hesitant. I didn't know you felt that way. It took me a long time to realize it too, I said, relaxing my tone slightly. But I'm done pretending. There was a long pause, and I could feel the tension in the air, even through the phone. For the first time in my life, I felt understood. I felt in control of the situation, and it felt great. It felt empowering. Finally, she sighed. I understand. I honestly do. But I'm still your mother, and all I want is for us to be a family again. I let her words linger in the air for a time. There was a moment when I would have raced back to them, hoping to make everything right. But I was not that person anymore. I'd discovered the hard way that they wouldn't change unless I forced them to see me. To consider me an equal. I'll think about it, I replied, echoing my previous remark. But this time, things were different. It was not about me giving in. It was about taking my time. It was about them recognizing that I was more than simply an afterthought. That I was not going to allow them drag me back into their toxic environment without reform. All right, my mother murmured softly. I hope you return soon. I just want you to be happy. I hung up the phone and sat back, taking deep breaths. It was not over. It was not a neat and tidy resolution. However, for the first time in a long time, I felt in control of the situation. I was not going to let them walk all over me anymore. And perhaps, just maybe, they would finally see me for who I truly was. I set down my phone and glanced out the window, watching the snow fall softly in the darkness. I wasn't sure what the future held. But for the first time in years, I felt truly free. And what about Christmas? It was not ruined. Because for the first time in my life, I was going to take care of myself. The rest can wait. As I sat there, watching the snow fall softly outside, I couldn't help but wonder, did I do the correct thing? Or did I simply walk away from something that could have been fixed? My wife cheated, got pregnant, demanded divorce and alimony, I exposed her to her church, ruining her reputation and getting her expelled. Hello everyone, before we start today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's simple, free, and allows us to keep bringing you great content. Your support means everything to us. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the video. So, since some of you have requested the complete tale, I guess I should start at the beginning. This is going to be long, but whatever. For the first 4 years of our marriage, my wife, I'll call her Jen, and I felt we were doing well. We met back in college. She was gorgeous as hell and seemed interested in my goals rather than just seeking a party person. I was working on my business degree while she studied education. We hit it off immediately. Following graduation, I embarked on my own consulting business. The first couple of years were sheer hell, working 80+ hour weeks, worrying about earning rent, the whole thing. But Jen was quite supportive back then. She would deliver me energy drinks at 2 a.m., give me encouraging speeches when clients ignored me while I was coding, all that girlfriend of the year stuff. She even recommended putting her teaching career on hold to help me build something amazing. It struck me as the most selfless act I'd ever witnessed. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flag waving directly in my face. We moved into a great house in a good neighborhood after my business started producing excellent money. Jen became obsessively connected with a local church. She began leading women's clubs, arranging charity activities, continuously posting Bible verses on Instagram, and preaching about family values and marriage sanctity. However, by the 4th year, things began to feel off. At first, there were little issues. She stopped inquiring about my day. Conversations that used to flow naturally were scripted, as if she was simply checking off boxes rather than genuinely listening. I'd ask easy questions like, "How was Bible study? Who showed up?" And she'd give vague, clipped responses, as if she was eager to shift the subject. What really surprised me was her sudden interest in our finances. Previously, she was pleased with having access to the credit cards and never inquired about the business. She suddenly wanted to know specific numbers. How much did we make last quarter? What's the business valued at now? Do we have assets I don't know about? At first, I assumed she was simply showing an interest, perhaps wanting to get further involved. Then I observed her taking pictures of the financial statements I had left out. One night, I discovered her looking through my office files while I was sleeping. "Just organizing," she said, although I noticed her reviewing documents on her phone. Things were gradually escalating, and I could feel the tension between us increasing by the day. Then her routine changed. Her routine became strange. Random late nights, weekend getaways that didn't add together. She'd leave the house wearing one clothing and return in another, dismissing it with a casual, "Oh, I spilled something." I noted one night how we hadn't spent much time together lately and how she seemed different. She rolled her eyes. "You're imagining things," she stated firmly, without looking at me. Then she suddenly became quite protective of her phone. She bought new, sexier clothes, but I never saw her wear them. She'd come back with claims that didn't fit, such as referencing restaurants in cities she'd never been to or having receipts for only one hotel room when she claimed to have gone with 4 ladies. I did not want to believe it. I assumed I was just worried as a result of my excessive workload. Then, one night, she arrived home late. Her hair was a little disheveled. Her makeup was smudgier than usual. And there was a faint, strange aroma on her, something harsh, like perfume. I didn't have any cologne. I asked casually at first. "Long night?" She hardly glanced at me as she kicked off her heels. "Yeah, Bible study ran late. Then we grabbed dinner. You know how it is." Except, I didn't. Bible study used to stop at 8 p.m., but suddenly she was walking in after midnight as if it were usual. "Smells like someone spilled cologne on you," I commented, watching her reaction. That's when her posture shifted, not guilty, but protective. She scoffed and crossed her arms. "You're seriously paying attention now? Maybe if you weren't always at the office, you'd actually know what's going on in my life." That was not an answer, it was a deflection. And it worked just as she intended, shifting the blame onto me. I could have pushed, but I did not. Because I already knew how this would turn out. If I accused her, she'd cry, alter the story, and blame me for being paranoid and inattentive. I wasn't going to let her distort the narrative, so I got smart about it. I began monitoring credit card statements. I checked her location history after she left her iPad unlocked. Pro tip: women never sign out of their accounts. And, sure enough, every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, she spent exactly 2 to 3 hours at a different address in town. An apartment complex. On Thursday, I decided to leave work early. I parked across from the complex and waited. Sure enough, at 2 p.m., Jen drew back sharply. 10 minutes later, he parked next to her. Tall dude. Gym bro type. One of those tribal tattoos on his arm, so cliché. I snapped photos of them walking in together, all touchy-feely. Sitting in my car, seething, I saw my wife, the lady around whom I had constructed my entire world, walk into another man's apartment with the same flirtatious enthusiasm she used to have with me. My mind was screaming at me to storm up there and tear down the door. But I forced myself to stay put. Rage is loud. But what about revenge? Revenge is quiet. When she returned 2 hours later, I shot additional photos. I watched them kiss as if they had all the time in the world, and right then, something in me turned off. No more doubts. I had lost the woman I loved. The guy's name was Eric. I discovered this through her text conversations when she left her phone to shower one night. He worked at her church, possibly as a youth pastor. The irony was too thick. But I did not confront her immediately. Instead, I obtained more proof, including screenshots of texts, further images of their meetings, and hotel receipts from her purse. I even recorded a phone call in which she told Eric that she was about to leave me and that they would finally be together. The most painful thing, however, was not just the dishonesty. It was discovering how long she'd been plotting my ruin. I reviewed her text with Eric, and what I saw made me literally nauseous. This wasn't a random event, she had been planning for months. I'm waiting for the right moment. He's too busy with work to notice anything. Once I file, I'll push for alimony. He won't see it coming. She wasn't simply going to leave me. She was using me to fund her new life. She and her boyfriend chuckled about how she'd make a nice landing while leaving me high and dry. That's when I realized she wasn't simply walking away. I was making certain she left with nothing. I met with my business accountant after hours and kept it casual. Thinking about restructuring a few things, I reported. Over the next several weeks, I made certain financial decisions, including prepaying my office lease for a year, paying down business debts faster, and shifting my salary so that more money stayed in the firm rather than displaying as personal income. I invested in new equipment which I knew I'd need soon but didn't technically need right now. On paper, it appeared like my business was controlling cash flow. Nothing suspicious, just routine operations that, strangely, made me appear a lot less liquid. At the same time, I created a second personal account with another bank and began moving tiny amounts. Nothing crazy, just enough to make a cushion that she wouldn't have access to. Everything was legal and properly documented. I wasn't hiding money. I was simply making sure she didn't get more than she deserved. And then, unexpectedly, she did me a favor. On a random Tuesday, she decided to blow it all up herself. When I got home from work, she was sitting on our couch with this bizarre, pleased expression on her face. "Mike," she said in a phony kind tone. "We need to talk." I knew what was about to happen but pretended not to know. "What's up?" "I'm pregnant." We hadn't been dating in months, so unless she was carrying baby Jesus 2.0, this wasn't mine. Before I could respond, she twisted the knife. "But it's not yours. I've been seeing someone else. I want a divorce." She stated it as if she were ordering takeout. There is no guilt. Without hesitation. 5 years of marriage, thrown away like an expired coupon. I could feel the wrath rising beneath my skin, and my hands flexed at my sides. Every instinct told me to throw the entire folder of evidence in her face, drag her through the mud right then and there. But then it struck me. It was perfect. She had no idea. No idea I already knew. No idea I had been observing, documenting, and waiting. She believed she was in control. She believed she was the one who ended things. I gave a lazy smirk. I noticed the spark of confusion in her eyes. She was waiting for me to explode, beg, and ask who. But I sat there, quiet as always. She doubled down. "And just so you know, you'll still be paying me alimony. I gave up my career for you, so you owe me." I locked eyes with her. "Jen," I commented. "Did you really think I wouldn't know about Eric?" Her face lost its color. I chuckled. "Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? 2 to 3 hours. Same apartment complex. Same parking spot. You didn't even try to mix it up. You really thought I was that stupid?" She stiffened, her jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, come on." I leaned back and stretched my arms across the back of the couch as if I had all the time in the world. "Bible study runs late, huh? That must be one hell of a lesson plan if it requires lingerie in a hotel room," I told myself. "And Eric, real winner you picked there. Youth pastor, huh? Wonder how his congregation would feel about him knocking up a married woman while preaching family values." She was now completely panicked. She sat up taller, her gaze darting around as if she were looking for an exit. "How long were you going to play with me, Jen?" I inquired, tilting my head. "You and your little boy toy were waiting for the right moment, right? Planning to milk me dry before you ran off together? What was it you said, he won't see it coming?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish panting for oxygen. I did not let her recover. I stood up. "Let me make something very clear. You are not walking away from this as the winner. You are not taking a damn thing from me that I don't let you have." She attempted to recover, disguising her dread with false assurance. "It's the law, Mike. You can fight it all you want, but you'll lose." I gave her the smuggest smile I'd ever given someone in my life. "If you say so," I answered simply. She felt she was hitting me with the ultimate power move. But, honestly, she saved me the work. All I had to do was smile and make her believe she was in control. Meanwhile, I had already moved 5 steps ahead. The next 2 weeks were bizarre. Jen moved out practically immediately, straight into Eric's place. She filed for divorce, claiming irreconcilable differences. Fancy legalese for "I want to bang other dudes without feeling bad about it." I met with a group of lawyers. The first 3 essentially informed me I was screwed. "No-fault divorce state" was their favorite phrase. Apparently, the fact that my wife was banging the youth pastor and was knocked up by him didn't matter in court. But I kept seeking until I found an attorney, let's call him Paul, who didn't sugarcoat the situation. "Look, man, I'm not going to lie to you," he told you. "You're probably going to have to pay her something, but we can try to minimize the damage." I then showed Paul my financial statements. He raised an eyebrow. "Interesting timing on some of these business expenses and restructuring," he commented, looking at me. He didn't say anything else. He couldn't legally advise me to hide assets, but I could sense he knew what I'd done. "Well, this might help reduce the alimony calculation somewhat, but in this state, you're still looking at significant payments." That is when the wheels started turning. The courts may not care about her cheating, but her holier-than-thou church cronies will. I chose to remain cool during the divorce proceedings. Let her believe she was winning. Give her only enough rope to hang herself. Court day was weird. I arrived in my nicest suit. Jen arrived with her pricey lawyer, dressed modestly, as if she were auditioning for Sister Wives. It was almost funny how false the act was. Before we even started, the judge appeared to be extremely bored. Jen's lawyer spoke first, spewing rubbish about how she gave up her bright profession to support me, how she managed our home while I established my business, and how she deserved compensation for her contributions to the marriage. Then it was our turn. My lawyer provided the evidence: her adultery, the pregnancy, and the fact that she was already living with Eric. Her attorney stood up. "Your Honor, let's not forget that we are in a no-fault state." He stated it so smugly, as if those 3 words erased everything she had accomplished. While my client deeply regrets that her marriage did not work out, the law is clear. Marital misconduct is not a factor in determining spousal support. What is relevant is the financial disparity between these 2 parties. Hearing how carelessly they discarded all she had done made me want to tear the entire courtroom apart. She cheated. She lied. She became pregnant with another man's child. And I was still supposed to pay her for leaving me. My lawyer pushed back, setting out all of the information again, highlighting how she wasn't simply leaving a marriage, but also establishing a financial safety net while living with someone else. But the judge only sighed, waiting for us to finish. When it was time for the ruling, he cleared his throat and lowered the hammer. While the court acknowledges Mr. Walker's concerns regarding his wife's infidelity, the law in this state is clear. Spousal misconduct is not a factor in determining alimony. Jen sneered at me from across the room. The judge proceeded. Given Mrs. Walker's financial dependence during the marriage and her current unemployment status, the court finds that she is entitled to spousal support. Mr. Walker will pay $4,500 monthly for a period of 4 years or until Mrs. Walker remarries. $4,500 every month for 4 years, to the woman who cheated on me while carrying another man's child. I felt as if I were taking wild medicines. But fortunately, my financial decisions had paid off. Sort of. Rather than being left with a $6,000 monthly payment, the judge reduced it to $4,500. Not ideal, but better than nothing. What is the best part? Jen and her lawyer had no idea about the money I still had tucked away. Or that my business would miraculously recover once this was all over. Jen couldn't help but appear smug as we walked out of court. "Told you," she said quietly as we passed. "Should have just agreed to my terms from the beginning." Then she had the audacity to phone Eric right in front of me. "Baby, it's done, we won," she giggled like a teen. "He has to pay." I told you the judge wouldn't care about the other stuff. I said nothing. Just watched her walk away, believing she had pulled off the ultimate deception. But the game was only getting started. I paid the first alimony check on time. I did not complain. Did not raise a fuss. Even sent a courteous email. Payment sent, please confirm the receipt. Jen appeared surprised. She undoubtedly expected me to be bitter, fight, and give her more ammunition. Instead, I played the ideal ex-husband, polite, timely with payments, aloof but not aggressive. She had no idea what was coming. Jen was more than simply a Harvest Community Church member. She was also their poster child. She led the women's ministry. She organized marriage retreats. She stood on stage throughout services, discussing God's plan for holy matrimony. Her father was a deacon. Her mother ran Sunday school. The entire family portrayed a wonderful Christian image. And I knew they'd throw her under the bus the moment they discovered who she truly was. I had collected everything. DNA testing results. Time-stamped images of her and Eric. Provide screenshots of their explicit texts. Hotel receipts. She even recorded herself insulting her religious mates for being uptight prudes. That one was especially juicy. I put everything in a neat professional folder and attached a cover letter that was really courteous and formal. To the elders at Harvest Community Church, I regret bringing this to your attention, but as a fellow Christian, I believe it is my responsibility. My ex-wife, Jennifer Walker, who oversees multiple ministries in your church, has been engaging in behavior that defies your church's principles. I've given documentation of her infidelity, which began during our marriage and resulted in a pregnancy that isn't mine, as proved by DNA testing. Jennifer is now living with this man and receiving considerable alimony from me. I'm sharing this not out of spite, but out of concern for the integrity of your ministry. Respectfully, Michael Walker. I dropped off the box early Sunday morning, when no one was present. Then I returned home and waited for the storm to hit. The Sunday after I sent my small care box, my phone blew up. Text messages from common church friends. Dude, WTF did you do? Pastor just called an emergency elder meeting before service. Jen is losing it. I simply turned off my phone and went back to sleep. It felt fantastic, not going to lie. Later that afternoon, I received a voicemail from Jen. She was shouting so loudly that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. You absolute piece of, how could you do this to me? They kicked me out of the women's ministry. My dad won't even look at me. You've ruined everything. I deleted it without phoning back. I don't need that negativity in my life. More messages arrived throughout the week, each more urgent than the last. Her church friends ignored her. Her parents were taking time to pray about the matter, which is church talk for we're disappointed in you. The Christian school where she volunteered begged her not to return. Even Eric was getting cold feet. Apparently, he did not sign up for all of this turmoil. He thought he was receiving a lovely woman and a solid alimony payment. Instead, he became a social outcast, with a baby on the way and a lot of baggage. By Friday, he had kicked her out of his flat. So much for pure love, right? Jen was summoned to a formal disciplinary hearing with the church elders 1 week after I dropped my evidence. I know because she called me, sobbing. Mike, please, they're going to publicly discipline me, she screamed. Do you know what that means? They'll announce it to the entire congregation. Everyone will know. They already know, Jen, I replied bluntly. That's kind of how church gossip works. My dad might lose his position over this. My family has been at Harvest for 3 generations. Should have thought about that before you fucked the youth pastor. She fell silent for a second. Then, in a soft voice, he's not talking to me anymore. Who? Your dad? No. Eric. He said this is too much drama, that I misled him about the divorce being clean and simple. I couldn't help laughing. So your soulmate bailed the second things got tough? Shocking. I have nowhere to go, Mike. My parents won't let me stay with them. None of my friends are returning my calls. Sounds like a personal problem. Can I come home? Just until I figure things out. This woman has an incredible amount of courage. It's not your home anymore, Jen. You gave that up when you decided to cheat. She began crying again, big, theatrical sobs. What am I supposed to do? Get a hotel. You've got alimony money coming in, figure it out. Then I hung up. Cold? Maybe. But after what she pulled, my sympathy tank was completely empty. The church hearing took place Wednesday night. By Thursday morning, the news had spread throughout the neighborhood. Jen had been formally identified as an adulteress and dismissed from all church responsibilities. The preacher even preached an entire sermon about the sacredness of marriage and the consequences of sin, never mentioning Jen specifically but making it abundantly clear who he was referring to. Her parents took a break from church leadership. Her sister postponed her wedding, which was due to take place at harvest. The entire family was essentially in exile. And Eric? He'd already requested a transfer to another church site in a faraway state, leaving Jen pregnant and alone. I remained on the sidelines throughout. I did not have to lift a finger. The community she admired most had done all of the difficult lifting for me. Small religious communities are tied to everything. Jen's church collapse set off a chain reaction that I could not have predicted better. First, the private Christian school where she worked part-time experienced budget constraints and canceled her position. The principal couldn't even look her in the eyes when he told her. Then, her volunteer gigs began to dry up. The Crisis Pregnancy Center, where she counseled young women, determined that her current circumstances made her a bad role model. The organization where she conducted donation drives informed her that they are restructuring their volunteer program. Every aspect of her identity was gradually chipped away. And I just kept paying the alimony check every month, on schedule. 3 weeks after the church controversy surfaced, I received a text from our former neighbor. Jen's living in her car in the Walmart parking lot. I did not respond. But later that night, I drove past. Sure enough, Hero Honda was parked in the far corner of the lot. I could see her silhouette in the driver's seat, lit by her phone screen. The following day, she called me again. I lost my job, she explained. Her voice was flat, no tears this time, just a hollow defeat. That sucks. The baby's due in 5 months. No one will hire me. My parents still won't talk to me. I said nothing. I've been sleeping in my car, she eventually acknowledged. I can't afford both a car payment and an apartment on just the alimony. Sounds like poor financial planning. She breathed sharply. Is this what you wanted? To see me completely destroyed? I considered it for a second. You know what? Yeah. Pretty much. I was stupid. I made a mistake. I never meant to hurt you. I shut her off. I don't care. She swallowed back a sob. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I smirked. Cool, good luck with your new life. And that's when I decided to play my last card. It's time to terminate this on my terms. Actually, I added, keeping my tone casual. I might have a solution that works for both of us. What kind of solution? Jen inquired, suddenly attentive. I could almost sense the anguish in her voice. I'm getting tired of writing these monthly checks, I added casually. And my business is expanding. I'm looking at opening an office in Singapore. Might move there for a while? What does that have to do with me? Well, international alimony enforcement is complicated. I waited to let it sink in. And I've been talking to a new lawyer who thinks we might have grounds to revisit the settlement, based on some creative interpretations of the law. Of course, that was complete crap. But Jen didn't realize it, and she was in no position to dispute me. What are you saying? She inquired. Her voice sounded panicked. I'm saying I'd like to buy you out. One lump sum payment instead of monthly alimony for the next 4 years. She remained silent as she considered the situation. How much? She finally inquired. $90,000. Cash. Tax-free. You sign a document releasing me from all future obligations, and the money's yours today. Jen had no idea I could afford that lump sum simply. The actions I made earlier had saved a large portion of my money, and my business was already recovering. She and her lawyer never discovered half of what I had. To her, $90,000 felt like a lifeline, but in reality, it was less than half of what I'd give her over the entire alimony period. A huge reduction. However, for someone living in their car, pregnant and broke, that probably sounded like winning the lottery. I don't know, she said. My lawyer said. Your lawyer isn't sleeping in a Walmart parking lot, I told him. And this offer expires in 24 hours. After that, I start the process to challenge the alimony ruling, and you get nothing while we battle it out in court for the next year or two. More silence. I could almost hear the wheels moving in her mind. Can I think about it? Sure, you've got until this time tomorrow. Then, I'm moving forward with the challenge. I hung up without waiting for an answer. She called again 2 hours later. I'll take it, she replied gently. Smart choice. I'll have the paperwork ready in the morning. Meet me at my lawyer's office at 9 a.m. Mike. Her voice sounded tiny. Thank you? I nearly laughed. Don't thank me, Jen. This isn't mercy. It's business. The following morning, She arrived at the lawyer's office looking like pure hell. She had dark circles under her eyes, her hair was unkempt, and she was dressed in the same clothes I had seen through the car window. My lawyer had the documentation ready, a full release of all future alimony obligations in exchange for a one-time payment. I had already prepared the cashier's check. Jen had barely read the contracts before signing. When my lawyer slid the check across the table, her hands trembled as she took it. "So? That's it?" she inquired. "We're done?" I nodded. "Completely done. I don't ever want to hear from you again." She appeared to want to say something more, but instead she simply nodded and walked out. As the door shut behind her, my lawyer shook his head. "You know, most guys in your position wouldn't have offered her anything." I informed him, it was worth 90 grand to be free of her forever. And I intended it. The monthly payments didn't damage me financially, but they were a continual reminder of how she had duped me. I was now entirely cut loose. I'm free to move on, without her shadow hanging over me. Besides, I knew Jen. She'd spend that money in 6 months, tops. Then she would have nothing. No alimony. No job prospects. No backup plan. Meanwhile, I would be establishing my empire, living my best life, and never looking back. Around 6 months later, I ran into her at a gas station. It wasn't planned, just one of those random occurrences. She appeared harsh. Still pregnant, or possibly pregnant again. I didn't ask or care. She was driving a beat-up old Civic, not the lovely automobile she had during our marriage. When she spotted me filling up my new BMW, she froze, like a deer in headlights. I nodded to her simply to be polite. She walked over with hesitation. There was awkward pause, and she said, "How are you?" I shrugged. "Business is good, life is good." She nodded and looked down at her feet. That's good." More uneasy silence. "The money's gone," she finally said. "I had to pay off debt, and the rest went to rent and food." I simply gazed at her. "Not my problem." "I know. I don't know why I'm telling you this." I finished pumping gasoline. "Well, good luck with everything." I began to get back into my car, but she spoke again. "I'm sorry, Mike, for everything. I really am." I gazed at her for a long time. Was it satisfying to watch her like this? Honestly, not as much as I expected. I didn't feel bad for her though. Too little, too late, Jen. Then I got into my car and drove away. Have not seen her since. Things for me have been going great. I met this lovely woman, she is incredible. She has her own marketing agency, works hard, plays hard, and does not play games or pull any BS. We moved in together 3 months ago. There's no urgency to marry again. Once bitten, twice shy and all that. But really, I could see it happening with her someday. She's the real deal. I tried not to get involved in Jen's affairs, but knowledge spreads quickly in a small town like this. Furthermore, we still have some mutual acquaintances who periodically send information my way. How much did I give her? $90,000. Gone in 4 months. Apparently, she used some to pay off credit card debt I had no idea about, bought a cheap apartment, and blew away the rest trying to maintain her lifestyle rather than adapting to her new circumstances. Jen's style is classic. I was never able to budget effectively. She had the baby, a boy. Eric is legally obligated to pay child support, but from what I've heard, he's a deadbeat who consistently falls behind. As previously said, he relocated to Ohio and has little to no contact with the child. I guess his call to youth ministry didn't extend to his own children. Shocking. Jen attempted to continue her teaching career, but her reputation followed her. She refused to attend any Christian school. She lacked current experience, which public schools preferred. Last I heard, she was working in a call center, earning little more than the minimum wage. What is the actual karma? What happened to her family? Her parents eventually forgiven her after 8 months of avoiding her, but their relationship is still tense. They occasionally assist with the infant, but they are constantly making comments about horrible life choices and dealing with the consequences. Her sister keeps her distance, clearly concerned that Jen's reputation may impact her own standing in the church. Jen attempted to rejoin the church community, but it did not go well. Although she can attend services, she is barred from all leadership positions indefinitely. She sits in the back and exits immediately after the service ends. No longer women's ministry, no more marital retreats, no change in social position. The ultimate irony. A common friend informed me that she has been telling people she made a mistake and should have worked on her marriage. Too late. As for me, I am doing better than ever. Business is thriving, the relationship is stable. I'm finally doing things I never had time for. I received my pilot's license. I took up mountain riding. I've even begun learning guitar. Lesson learned? Sometimes the worst things that happen to you result in the best version of your life. You simply have to be willing to burn the bridges that must be burned, and never look back. So I suppose that's it. I probably won't post an update on this whole situation because, honestly, I'm not thinking about Jen much these days. I have better things to focus on. Oh, and one last thought for anyone going through something similar: record everything. Capture screenshots. Save text. Gather evidence. It may not be useful in court, no-fault divorce laws and all, but knowledge is power. And you never know when you might need that power. Goodbye, Reddit. I let my unemployed sister stay for free, but after getting engaged, she blocked me, so I canceled my deal to help her fiancé with rent. All of this began around 2 weeks ago, when my sister's boyfriend proposed to her and invited her to move in with him. Then, earlier this week, she arranged an engagement party without inviting me. Things had already become strained between us, but this was the tipping point for me. We had a tremendous quarrel when I questioned her about not inviting me, especially because I had supported her and allowed her to live with me rent-free for the previous year. She informed me that an idiot like me was no help in the first place, and that she didn't want to remain in touch with me any longer since she had had enough of me. Of course, it was completely ungrateful and disrespectful. So I called off my little deal with her guy. Now she's constantly apologizing, but I don't need it. I wouldn't have had any second thoughts if it hadn't been for my mother. For perspective, Janet, my sister, lost her job as a copywriter after her firm announced major layoffs. She tried freelancing for a while, but it didn't pay well, and she eventually couldn't afford rent. She was kicked out of her flat and had to come to me. Previously, she and I had an acceptable relationship. We weren't particularly close, but I let her move in because I felt sorry for her. She was definitely going through a difficult time, and she needed all the aid she could get. Our mother lives far away with our brother, so she couldn't help, and I was Janet's only family member nearby. For the past year, I've let her remain with me without paying rent because my husband and I make enough money to cover it. She not only did not pay rent, but she also made no effort to help with home tasks or finances. We treated her like a child, and this is how she decided to repay me. Naturally, I was angry. I could tell she was doing better in the final few months since she began to spend more time with her pals. Despite this, she refused to take a job. She was either depleting her savings or spending the money our mother sent her as an allowance until she found something worth her time. I felt it was odd for a woman in her mid-20s to live like that. Since she was clearly no longer battling mentally, I began urging her to look for work. That led to a lot of arguments since she wanted me to get off her back and stop bothering her, whereas I thought she was wasting money. Our relationship deteriorated over time because she refused to listen to my advice, despite the fact that it was sound. Then last month, I discovered that I was pregnant. My husband and I decided she couldn't live with us any longer since it would be too much work, and we wanted to convert her room into a nursery. Fortunately, we did not need to have that conversation with her. Just a few days after I found out I was pregnant, Janet's boyfriend Caleb approached me and said he wanted help choosing a ring because he was about to propose. They had been together for 4 years. He had supported her through thick and thin, and he was a decent man. Janet hadn't moved in with him earlier because they worked in the same department and were laid off at the same time. He'd had a difficult year as well. However, a few months ago, he found a new job. He told me that during the first several months of the engagement, he wanted to live with his parents. Once he found an apartment he liked and saved enough money, he would move in and invite Janet to join him. His funds had suffered significantly because he was no longer living rent-free with his parents, as Janet did. Since I really wanted Janet to move out, I proposed that he find an apartment first, move in, and then propose. After that, he could invite Janet to live with him. That way, everything would go well. He was concerned about the expenses, but I promised him that I would pay Janet's half of the rent for the first few months until she found work. I devised this strategy because I desperately needed to leave the house before my second trimester began. Maybe it was a little sly, but I didn't want to jeopardize my already poor relationship with Janet by bringing up the unpleasant topic of her staying with us. This manner, everyone benefited, so I didn't give it much thought. Within a few weeks, Caleb had secured an apartment, and he and I had reached an agreement. Everything went precisely as I expected. Janet moved out just a few days after her engagement. However, once she had a ring on her finger and a place to stay, her attitude toward me shifted dramatically. I could sense something was wrong. Even then, I never dreamed she'd exclude me from her engagement party after everything I'd done for her. When I challenged her about it, she called me a fool and claimed that I had not been helpful at all. She stated that I had only put pressure on her in recent months, causing her undue anxiety, and that she was relieved to be gone. She wanted nothing to do with me anymore, so she blocked me. I was obviously irritated, so I called Caleb and informed him that I was canceling our little deal. Janet was obviously ungrateful, and I didn't need to worry about her anymore. She is an adult lady who can manage herself. She is not my child, so I do not have to feel terrible about this. This put Caleb in a difficult situation as well, but I couldn't care less at the time because I was so upset. A few days later, Janet unblocked me and began apologizing. Then, yesterday, my mother called and told me I was being really unreasonable. She claimed that what I had done was useless and weird. She informed me there was no need to manipulate Janet and Caleb only to get Janet out of my house. I could have simply sat her down and had an honest chat with her. Everything would have been plain. Perhaps I agree with that. I don't believe my mother was absolutely wrong. But, in my defense, Janet had already been quite difficult to cope with for the previous few months. I didn't want to add to my stress by attempting to have that talk since I knew Janet wouldn't take it well unless she already had somewhere to go. My mother also said that by pulling out of the transaction, I was causing unneeded difficulties for Caleb, who was absolutely blameless in the issue. However, I couldn't get myself to care about it either. My mother also stated it was embarrassing for our family, and I suppose she's correct. That is why I have been thinking about it so much. I'm torn. I don't want to back out of the transaction since that would make me a big jerk. But at the same time, I really don't want to help Janet, especially after what she said to me. She basically called me a stupid after I had done so much for her in the previous year. I'm in a huge quandary right now and desperately need some decent guidance. Am I wrong for pulling out of the deal and causing problems for my sister and her fiancé? Update 1. Thank you to everyone who reacted to my post. After much consideration, I decided to discuss it with Caleb. He is the one person I owe an explanation to in this situation. After all, he did everything I asked of him because he trusted me, and I don't want to leave him in a difficult situation. I informed him that I would continue to assist him financially, but that if Janet finds work, I would like all of the money returned. This is just a one-time favor for Janet, and I don't want to engage with her again. Even this contact was exclusively between Caleb and me. I didn't want him caught in the crossfire between Janet and myself. As I have stated, Caleb is a truly kind guy, and I don't think it's fair to leave him hanging, especially considering his financial position. He appeared relieved when I spoke with him on the phone. He informed me that he understood how furious I was, but he was grateful that I did not back out of the transaction, which would have left him in a terrible situation. He also encouraged me to make amends with Janet. But that's where I draw the line. I don't want anything to do with my family right now, including my mother. While my mother had a good point about how I could have simply spoken to Janet, told her the truth about my pregnancy, and asked her to leave, she fails to recognize that I had previously tried to be polite to Janet for a long period. Janet made things exceedingly difficult for me. Let's not forget that my mother was helping her by sending her a monthly allowance, despite my repeated warnings that this was preventing Janet from becoming independent. I cautioned her that her actions would ensure Janet never got a job or got back on her feet, but she ignored me. So I think I'm really a fool. Because, at the end of the day, I feel used by my family. Janet clearly utilized me for a rent-free place to live without contributing monetarily or assisting with tasks. My mother practically used me to support Janet while disregarding my sentiments. If she cared, she would have heeded my advice and encouraged Janet to seek a job rather than providing her with free money. She was not even enthusiastic about my pregnancy. Instead, she was more concerned with Janet's condition and did not congratulate me. Anyway, the basic line is that, while I feel horrible about what's going on with my family, I'm not going to let it interfere with my life. I'm embarking on a new path as a mother, and I'd like to start on a positive one. I do not want any negativity in my life at the moment. As a result, I have chosen to cut off all communication with my mother and sister. I'm not going to lie, it will be difficult. Aside from them, I just have my in-laws for my family. My father died in an accident when I was 7 years old, and his parents died shortly after that. We don't have much contact with his family, and I'm not close to any of my other relatives. It used to be just my mother, Janet, and I against the world. Janet and I had a close relationship as children. However, as we grew older, we became further apart. Recently, I believed we were reuniting, but then something happened. Now I think I'd be better off without them. Even though I'll be lonely, at least I won't be stressed. And even if I don't have my family with me, I have my husband, which is enough for me. Update 2. It's been 5 weeks since my last update, and my mother unexpectedly showed up today. I had the day off, so I spent it at home. I heard the doorbell ring just as I was about to leave work. I looked outside and saw my mother standing there. I was surprised because she normally prefers to stay in her hometown and dislikes traveling or spending overnight anywhere. She finds it unpleasant. Her last visit was short for one day to attend Janet's engagement party. She flew back home the next morning, so we didn't even get to meet. This time, she said that she had come because Janet wanted her to meet Caleb's parents in a more intimate environment, so they had a family meal. She'd traveled in just for it. Now that she knew I was pregnant, I suppose she felt compelled to pay me a visit rather than go immediately. She had been attempting to contact me on a regular basis over the last few weeks, but I had ignored her. However, now that she was standing directly outside my door, I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard the phone ring or that I was preoccupied. I had no choice but to let her inside. When we started talking, she apologized for her prior actions. However, she also felt that my behaviors were weird and needless. She said it was very typical of me to go behind someone's back and create plans only to get them out of my house when I could have had an honest chat with them. I had to explain to her that Janet and I had been having troubles for months and that I did not want to further the situation. Even then, I was trying to be a better person by avoiding drama. I had gone out of my way to assist Janet so that she did not find up in a situation where she had nowhere else to turn. That is why I had to take such precautions. She would have understood why I did this if she had checked on me as often as she did Janet. Clearly, she had no concept what things were like from my perspective. I did tell her that she was correct, as I had previously, and stated that despite our frequent fighting, I should have just informed Janet that I was pregnant and requested her to leave her room. She probably would have taken it well, and if she didn't, I should have taken my chances rather than gone out of my way to construct a living environment that favored her in order to prevent conflicts or drama, like a fool. At that time, my mother had the foresight not to say anything else and left it at that. She then moved the subject to my pregnancy, and we talked about it for a while. However, I was already getting irritated, so I was extremely dry with her. After a while, she assured me she understood why I was still unhappy with her, and that I had every right to be. However, she was the baby's grandmother and desperately wanted things to return to normal. She asked me to stop ignoring her because she wanted to stay in touch and see how my pregnancy was going. I told her I'd think about it, but right now, I just needed some space. She eventually left, and that was all. I'm not sure what to make of this conversation, but at least we got it out of the way. I'm not sure if I'll respond when she starts texting and calling again, but I might try. At the very least, I am not as upset as I was before, which is an improvement. Update 3. Hello, it's been 3 weeks since my previous update. My mother has consistently tried to contact me. I've been responding to her texts and returning her calls on and off, whenever I feel like it. I rarely answer, but I'm not entirely ignoring her like I used to. I'm still unhappy with how things turned out for my family, so I'm taking my time. She'll have to cope with it if she wants to maintain touch with her granddaughter, at least until the next grandchild arrives, if you get what I mean. Anyway, I believe the situation with my mother has marginally improved. However, my status with Janet has remained largely unchanged. We remain emotionally detached and refuse to interact with one another. I have not spoken to her since my last conversation with Caleb. Caleb did inform me that Janet has finally found work and will begin repaying me within the next few weeks. It's a relief because I had almost given up hope of seeing my money again. I'm not sure why it took her so long to get back on her feet, but I'm relieved it's finally happening. It's for her own good, and honestly, I'm just relieved that I won't have to get involved in this mess anymore. My baby is my primary priority right now. The pregnancy is going well, albeit morning sickness has already set in, which has been the most difficult challenge so far. Aside from that, I am quite delighted to become a mother. My husband, aware that I do not have a good relationship with my family right now, has gone above and above to keep me happy and distracted. His family has been tremendously supportive, particularly my mother-in-law. I consider myself really fortunate to have such a supportive mother-in-law. She has been coming over very frequently, taking care of me, making sure I don't overwork myself, and has even begun cooking for us. I can't begin to express how beneficial that has been. It makes me sad that my mother isn't doing anything for me other than attempting to stay in touch. But I suppose that's simply how she is. If Janet had been pregnant, I'm very sure my mother would have flown in and moved in with her. In that sense, I'm grateful that I'm not Janet, because I doubt I would have been able to compromise my privacy in that way. Update 4. Hello, it's been 2 weeks since my last report, and today I received my first payment from Janet. She messaged me that she had received her first paycheck a few days earlier and that she felt it was right to begin repaying me for all of the help and support I had provided her over the previous year when she was struggling. She also apologized for her past behavior and expressed her desire that we could become friends again eventually. I felt awkward and emotional after reading that. I thanked her and told her I desired the same thing, and that was all. There are still more payments to make, but I hope she does not send any more emotional messages like this. Honestly, they just make me feel horrible about everything that happened, which I don't need right now. I simply want to be happy. I want to appreciate this period in my life. I do not wish to linger on the past. Speaking of which, as my pregnancy is advancing, my mother called me earlier this week to see how I felt about her visiting every other weekend. She said she could take the bus and travel on alternating weekends to see me and help me. Flights would be prohibitively expensive for frequent travel, so the bus would have to suffice. It's only a 6-hour drive from her home to mine, so she claimed it wouldn't be too difficult. I considered it, but ultimately declined. First and foremost, no matter how much she wants to come see me and help, I know it would be extremely uncomfortable for her to travel in that manner owing to her back and knee problems. That's why she doesn't travel often, and when she does, she takes flights, even if they're only 45 minutes. I don't want to cause her any discomfort. That was one of my reasons for saying no. The other reason is that, while I appreciate the invitation, I know that if she comes over, she will want to remain with me now that I am pregnant. She usually stays in hotels because she enjoys the luxury, and it makes her trips feel like vacations. However, the situation has altered. I know she'll want to stay at my place, but I don't want to give up my privacy, especially with the baby on the way. Both my spouse and I work hard, and we rarely have time to see each other throughout the week. I'm attempting to finish up all of my work before leaving on maternity leave, and he's working extra hours for a raise. Weekends are all we have, and I do not want to waste them. However, I knew my mother really wanted to see me, so I devised another plan. I informed her that she could visit us on the last weekend of each month. My mother would no longer have to fly every other weekend and would be able to spend more time with us. We decided on this arrangement because it seemed to work for both of us. My husband and I would still have to miss one of our weekends, but since my mother was making an effort, I was willing to compromise. My mother-in-law agreed with this approach because, at the end of the day, family is vital. And, as much as I tried to hide it, it was clear that I missed being on good terms with my family. Of course, what had happened was unacceptable, and I had every right to be furious. But if they were making an attempt and I wanted to give them another chance, that was excellent for me as well. So, I believe it's a terrific idea, and I truly hope I can work things out with my mother. My sister's condition is still unresolved, but I don't mind. She appears to be doing well for herself, at least, I hope so, and I am too. Right now, these minor variances don't bother me. I just want to make sure the future is a positive one. Honestly, the only thing that matters to me right now is my baby. I'm going to do whatever makes me happy because, if I'm happy, my baby is happy, or so I've heard. LOL. Update 5. Hello, it's been a few months since my previous post, and I finally have time to write because I've been busy with my baby for the past few weeks. I had my baby 3 weeks ago, and she is a complete joy. She's brought everyone together, and I couldn't be happier. My mother and I continued with the arrangement we established in my previous report. She started visiting me on the final weekend of each month. However, in the days running up to my due date, she stayed with me, which was quite pleasant. She sincerely apologized to me. She recognized that she had not been a good mother to me and that she sincerely wanted to make amends, not just for her grandson, but because it was the proper thing to do. She also informed me that she loves Janet and me equally, but that in the last year, she had been a little biased because Janet had been struggling. Perhaps that's why she asked me to be gentler with her. However, she was unaware that she was treating me unfairly. She apologized for this as well. A long time has passed, and I have resolved to forgive her. We've agreed to work on our relationship and try to improve. Janet had been paying me back in installments, and she made her final payment last month. In the midst of it all, she hadn't sent any more emotional texts than she had the first time. However, after completing her final payment, she contacted me to express her want to discuss and work things out between us. She wished to apologize for what she had done. So I decided to invite her over. When she arrived, she very much broke down and apologized. She stated that she had been in a tough emotional state, which caused her to act out. She assured me that she, not I, had been the fool. She claimed she had been ungrateful and that I did not deserve anything that had transpired. She was overjoyed that I had agreed to talk to her. So, Janet and I have agreed to try to restore our relationship. Perhaps, in time, we will be as close as we were as children. Janet has been coming frequently since my daughter was born, and my daughter adores her Aunt Janet. This makes me happy. As I mentioned earlier, My baby has actually brought everyone together. Her birth seems to have healed everything. Almost everyone was there for me while I was in labor. In the delivery room, I had my husband, his family, and my own. That day will remain the most memorable of my life.